Chapter 152. Sure Sui fell to the ground powerlessly. He has lost his Manjikyu Sharingan, and he is now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Whether he is killed or not depends entirely on Kagami's will. It's really bad. Dustless, who was controlling Kagami in the Rain Village, frowned slightly. Fugaku's will was tampered with by Kotoe Tsukumi. If he doesn't change his mind back to its original state, I'm afraid that the Uchiha will really turn their hostility towards Konoha into friendship. I can only use that technique. The hesitation in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Dustless took back his dojutsu and continued to control Kagami's actions. Kagami suddenly closed his eyes, and after a while, when he opened them again, they became ordinary Sharingan. Idiot, do you think that you can stop me without your Manjikyu Sharingan? Anyway, I'm using Kagami's eyes. It's just a loss of one eye. Dustless of the Rain Village secretly sneered. It was impossible to help Fugaku by blinding his own eyes, but he could use Kagami's eyes to launch the jutsu. Huh. Uchiha Kagami, who was in the middle of the secret meeting with Uchiha Fugaku in the Naka Shrine, suddenly shouted loudly, and his 3 Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected and turned into a big pinwheel, and immediately a strong chakra fluctuation erupted from his body and rushed straight towards Uchiha Fugaku. Huh. Fugaku, who was affected by chakra, opened his eyes in a daze and looked at Kagami in a daze. He could feel that Kagami woke him up. Izanami. Kagami's left eye suddenly jumped, and a strong dojutsu suddenly burst out, and all of his dojutsu rushed out. Fugaku's eyes were empty and gray, and he lost the ability to think like a vegetable. He just looked at Fugaku and then fainted again. Just a moment ago, Kagami used his Izanami to change Fugaku's will back to his original ambitious self. It seems that your plan has failed, Sure Sui. Looking back at Uchiha Sure Sui, who was lying motionless on the ground, Kagami said faintly. The left eye that released his Izanami was also completely sealed, turning into a one-eyed beast. You should be Lord Dustless. Sure Sui seemed to have reached the end of his life. His voice was extremely weak. He seemed to have exhausted all his strength, but his tone was full of unquestionable certainty. You're as sharp as ever, Sure Sui. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, heard this and immediately shook his head. Uchiha Sure Sui used to be like this. Even if Dustless and Sure Sui only spent a short time together, no matter when and where, he was always so straightforward and not sloppy, and he was also very smart. If Sure Sui's position wasn't so firm, Dustless really wanted to take him as his subordinate. When the Golden Consusinu appeared, I was already sure that in this era, only Dustless Sama, who died a few years ago, has that level of power. Sure Sui was fortunate enough to be taught by Dustless, so naturally, he knew Dustless better than anyone else. Do you hate me, Sure Sui? With a slight sigh, Kagami didn't try to hide it, which is equivalent to indirectly controlling Dustless. His right eye, which had completely disappeared due to the activation of his Izanami, opened again, revealing a clear black pupil. Naturally, it was created by Dustless using yin-yang release. I don't hate you, but now I understand a little bit why Dustless Sama chose to leave Konoha. Sure Sui, who was lying on the ground, looked ordinary. His position was different, and his thoughts were different, and everything he knew was taught to him by Dustless. Where there are people, there will be darkness, and where there is darkness, there will be conflict, and where there is conflict, there will be bloodshed like this. The so-called peace doesn't exist. The essence of peace is absolute force, and if the strength of a village doesn't surpass the strength of other villages, it will be trampled. Now that he recalled what Dustless said to him, Sure Sui felt his heart suddenly open. Konoha was peaceful, but this so-called peace was built on the pain of other countries. It was a false peace, so the so-called peace didn't exist at all. I'm happy that you can see things so clearly, Sure Sui. His left eye suddenly turned blue, and Kagami suddenly raised his head and swept towards the distant sky. The powerful insight of the Tensigen was displayed, and the situation within a radius of tens of kilometers was clear to him. Even the slightest movement in the wind couldn't escape his eyes. Huh, that's... A dark shadow quickly entered Dustless's line of sight. The young man was quite handsome, and his appearance was similar to Dustless's, as if they were carved from the same mold. The newcomer was wearing Konoha's Umbu uniform, and the 8 mark on his face was clearly visible, but from beginning to end, there was endless indifference, and he kept people thousands of miles away. Finally, my stupid brother, I've been waiting for you to win the Best Actor award for a long time. Retracting the Tensegen's line of sight, Kagami's mouth curled into an indifferent smile. The Best Actor award in his mouth was undoubtedly Uchiha Itachi. Looking back, he then looked at Kagami, who was still motionless and breathing weakly, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Now, Itachi still had 3 Tomo Sharingan, and as long as Kagami killed Shursui in front of him, he could help Itachi awaken the Manjiki Sharingan. Thank me, I actually have to do it for you. Itachi quickly came into sight. Kagami's murderous intent flashed, and suddenly a black flame jumped out of his fingertips. Looking indifferently at the half-dead Shursui, he ruthlessly threw the black flame. Chapter 153. Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke in the system and took everything from him. There is no doubt that he also took the ability to control the Amaterasu at will. The flame in Kagami's hand was undoubtedly the Amaterasu. The moment the black flame touched Shursui, it suddenly enlarged and instantly wrapped his whole body. Shursui's whole body was bathed in the strange black flame. And this scene was seen by Itachi, who just arrived in time. Shinra Tensei. Seeing Itachi rushing straight towards him, Kagami shook his head, and an irresistible repulsion broke out of his body. Itachi was caught off guard and bounced back dozens of feet. Itachi was particularly weak now. Like a willow branch swaying in the wind, he could only go with the flow, watching the Amaterasu constantly swallowing Shursui's body. Shursui, Uchiha Itachi, let out a sorrowful cry as he looked at Shursui, who was completely swallowed up. The 3 Tomo in his eyes surged with powerful dojutsu fluctuations, turning into the Manjiki Sharingan in the shape of a windmill. This should be considered as fulfilling your wish. Shursui, go in peace. Kagami turned his head and looked at Shursui with no expression. Far away in the rain village, Dustless's eyes dimmed. The relationship between Shursui and Itachi was well known, and he was reluctantly helping Itachi. As expected of Uchiha Itachi. Noticing the unusual fluctuations in Itachi's eyes, Kagami nodded slightly in appreciation. Looking at Itachi's murderous face, he shrugged helplessly and smiled. I am the benefactor who helped you open the Manjiki Sharingan. Now, instead of thanking me, you are staring at me like you want to eat me. It's really Amaterasu? Suddenly, a dark flame appeared on Kagami's body, just like the Amaterasu that appeared on Shursui's body. It seems that this kid's vengeful heart is quite strong, and he intends to kill him in the same way. You really don't understand human feelings. Uchiha Kagami's frivolous voice came from the fire that was devoured by the Amaterasu. His tone sounded like he was in pain, and he seemed to be mocking Itachi for overestimating himself. Immediately, he walked out of the black fire safely with a frivolous expression. What a strange ability to absorb the Amaterasu. Itachi's incomparably calm face was full of surprise, and his heart was silent. He cautiously looked at Kagami, who walked out of the fire with the Amaterasu burning on his shoulder, secretly thinking about the ability of the person in front of him. Well, let's play. Let's see how many tricks you have. Looking at the bloodstains from the corner of Itachi's eyes, due to using Amaterasu, Keiji's Tenseigen directly swept towards Itachi and saw the internal situation of Itachi's body clearly. It's Kagami's eyes. Kagami says. Through the high-density observation of the Tenseigen, Kagami found that Itachi's body was normal, and the reason why he got sick later was probably because of the excessive use of the Manjiki Sharingan. Itachi can be said to be the most abnormal and most unreasonable member of the Uchiha family in history. Kinsusanu, was the only one who had 3 generations of artifacts. Once he merged with the Manjikyu Sharingan and gave birth to the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, his ultimate body, Kinsusanu, would be the most powerful. The gap between us is too big, and you're not my opponent. Kagami stared at Itachi's cautious face, smiled slightly, and immediately said, "Come on, let me see how strong you are." Hearing this, Itachi just looked at Dustless with a blank face, and his pupils were as calm as stagnant water. He didn't look like a person who was in a desperate situation at all. The windmill-like Manjikyu Sharingan rotated rapidly, and his pupils set off stormy waves. Tsukuyami, the smiling Uchiha Kagami's pupils instantly turned gray and lost their color. He looked like a walking corpse, as if his soul had been taken away. Is this the burden of the Manjikyu Sharingan? It's really a self-destructive eye. The stinging pain in his eyes made Itachi feel like dying, especially when he used the Amaterasu. An unprecedented sense of mental exhaustion poured into his body, and his strength and bones seemed to be taken away, making him feel like he was about to collapse. But fortunately, I killed him. Looking at Uchiha Kagami's gray pupils, Itachi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he used the unexpected Tsukuyami to deal with him. Otherwise, a fierce battle would have been inevitable. Kill me? Do you think you can kill me with this Jinjutsu? You're so naive that it makes me feel sad, Itachi. A dark shadow blocked the sun, and Itachi was slightly startled. He suddenly looked up and saw Uchiha Kagami, who appeared in front of him and scathed. Lightspeed kick, boom. Itachi, who didn't react, flew out like a cannonball. The destructive force broke countless trees behind him and pulled out a long ditch. You want to defeat me with a mere Jinjutsu? Ridiculous. Kagami looked at Itachi with interest and nodded slightly. Just now, he used the ability of the Manjikyu Sharingan's right eye, Omniscient, to ignore Itachi's Tsukuyami. In front of Omniscient, no ability in the world is effective against him. Only physical attacks work, no matter what kind of Jinjutsu it is. His reaction is quite fast. Feeling a slight numbness in his feet, Kagami's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise and immediately looked at the fiery red chakra wrapped around Itachi's body and calmed down again. Just now, it was obvious that he summoned Susanoo to block Dustless's heavy blow for him. Chapter 154. Uchiha Itachi, who was flying upside down, raged the surrounding terrain like a harvester, easily pulling out hundreds of meters of narrow ditches. However, due to the powerful defense of Susanoo, although Itachi was injured, it wasn't fatal and didn't get in the way. Pucci, what a powerful force. The blood in his lungs was boiling, and the red blood directly broke out of his mouth and sprinkled all over the void. Uchiha Itachi's face was particularly ugly, and he subconsciously touched his chest. Maybe if he didn't react quickly just now, he might have been broken by Dustless's kick. At this moment, it was not impossible for his soul to return to the sky. He slowly stood up, brushed off the fresh soil on his body, and his calm eyes fell on Kagami. The coldness in his pupils condensed into ice, and a cold, killing intent emerged. In this case, I can only meet force with force. After saying that, Uchiha Itachi's body surged with crimson chakra. The deep color was as enchanting as blood, wrapping his whole body tightly. It was like a strong iron bucket that could defend against any attack. Chakra continued to gush out, and the momentum didn't stop. The bones formed before seemed to be alive, constantly absorbing chakra from Itachi's body, strengthening their own body, and rapidly expanding. He's really desperate. Looking at Itachi releasing his chakra without restraint, Kagami frowned slightly. This kid is supposed to die young. If his lifespan is reduced because of this battle, it's not if, it's definitely going to reduce his lifespan. Ow, ow, ow. A deafening roar sounded, like a thunder on the ground, awakening Dustless from his contemplation. Looking up, he saw a fiery red halo covering the sky, and the sunlight projected from Katsusuno had a feeling of being eroded by evil. His entire body was covered in crimson flames that seemed to come from the red lotus karmic fire of hell, destroying all matter that came into contact with it. The giant held an incomparably sharp greatsword in one hand and an incomparably sturdy shield in the other. It gave the feeling of a fearless god of war, despising everything. This looks pretty good. Kagame's eyes swept over Kensusanu's body, and a faint ripple appeared in his eyes. He felt that Kensusanu was barely acceptable. At least, it looked much stronger than Shirsue's Kensusanu. It could attack and defend, especially with a long-range attack weapon like Yasaka's Magatama. Overall, Uchiha Itachi's Susanoo is the most perfect. The only pity is that this seemingly invincible Susanoo is not the ultimate form, and it is inevitable that there will be some flaws. Whoosh! With a touch of coldness in his eyes, Kagami waved his hand, and a powerful golden beam swept straight towards Kensusanu's eyebrows. The cold beam seemed to penetrate Itachi's head. It's useless. Seeing this, Itachi's eyes were as calm as water, and at the same time, Kensusanu's crimson shield and Yada no Kagami blocked in front of the oncoming golden beam without fear. The golden light that seemed to penetrate everything was easily blocked by the fiery red shield, leaving only a thumb-sized burn mark on Yada no Kagami, emitting a faint white smoke. It's a good defense, I want to rob it. Kagami sincerely praised, and he coveted the absolute defense of Yada no Kagami. He couldn't help but want to use the system's ability to train Itachi and steal Kensusanu's ability. Crazy talk. The calm eyes looked at Kagami indifferently, and 3 huge fiery red tomo condensed in his hand. The shape of the tomo was connected by a rope, quite similar to the 3 tomo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Yada no Magatama. Kensusanu's big hand threw out the fiery red tomo with great power, and it felt like it could crush and strangle Kagami. It's useless as long as I want to. This attack can't even touch me. After saying that, Uchiha Kagami's whole body was covered in a golden halo, turning into a golden giant arm holding a long sword. He stared at the 3 red tomo without fear, and the golden long sword roared down. Kensusanu followed the mind of the caster to make any action, and it could also be used locally, such as only summoning a partial arm, palm, and other forms to fight. Whoosh! A dazzling golden light flashed in the void, and Susanu's Tachi, which shrouded Wuchen's body, roared out, and the golden light directly penetrated the crimson flame. Kacha! The 3 tightly connected tomo were torn apart by brute force, and the uneven gap looked like it was torn apart by a fierce beast, and people couldn't help but wonder what kind of beast this masterpiece came from. Sure enough, the gap is too big. Seeing the destruction of Yasaka's Magatama, Itachi frowned slightly and secretly thought about countermeasures to deal with Kagami. However, he was helpless to find that he had no means to suppress Kagami. The so-called strategy played no role in the face of absolute power, and it would only make him a laughingstock. If you don't come, I'll attack. Seeing that Itachi didn't move, Kagami took the initiative to attack, and his whole body burst out in a rainbow light, and the harsh roar blew the air to the horizon. So fast, Itachi's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately controlled Kensusanu's Sword of Tatsuka to slash at Kagami, and the falling cold light seemed to delay the speed of Kagami's attack. Stupid thing, now I'll let you understand how big the gap between us is. You can't fight me with the weak eyes of the Mangekyo, never. Chapter 155. His pupils dilated, and the Rinnegan in his left eye flashed again, and 9 dark tomo hung on the black coil, giving people a feeling of extreme mystery. Kagami's speed was extremely fast, like a gust of wind, and he couldn't be touched. Kagami's left eye's sight fell down, and on the blade, a strong repulsive force suddenly surged in his pupils, and the 9 tomo also trembled fiercely. Mahabharata! Boom! The irresistible, powerful, repulsive force broke out again, and the location of the explosion was Kensusanu holding the Tatsuka sword. The strong wave spread to the sky like an endless wave, and Kensusanu, who was at the center of the explosion, was directly swallowed. Kensusanu's huge body was instantly dismembered, destroyed by the unparalleled, overbearing repulsive force, and completely wiped out. Because the power was too terrifying, it simply wiped out all the flowing matter in the surrounding air, forming a large vacuum area. And even in an instant, space was distorted by brute force, causing a large area of space-time reflux, and then space collapsed. As for Uchiha Itachi, he had completely fainted, and his breath was weak, but he was still alive. Of course, this was the result of Kagami's intention. Finally, it's done. Looking at the half-dead Uchiha Itachi lying on the ground, Dustless, who was far away in a rain village, smiled as if he had succeeded in his plot. He breathed a sigh of relief. This is barely on the right track. I'm afraid it won't be long before you agree to the conditions of Konoha's higher-ups and choose to go undercover inside the Akatsuki, and that kid Uchiha Obito seems to have promised you that he won't do anything to Konoha. Carefully recalling the memories of his previous life, he realized that Uchiha Itachi would soon betray Konoha and embark on the road of no return. Well, Kagami's huge perception spread out like a tide, and suddenly felt that the surrounding environment was not right, and some ripples flashed in his eyes, and his face was full of surprise. It turned out to be him. After carefully sensing the surroundings, he suddenly realized that a large number of powerful ninjas were rushing over, and the one leading them was the leader of the Root Division, Shimura Danzo. In fact, Shui should have been dealt with by Shimura Danzo. The reason why Uchiha Jin replaced Danzo was that Shui used Kotoemitsu Tsukumi on Fugaku Uchiha, so he had no choice but to act. Leave the two of them here. Even if Danzo is brave, he won't dare kill them. Taking a glance at Fugaku and the unconscious Itachi, Kagami thought to himself, one is the patriarch, and the other is the son of the patriarch. If Shimura Danzo killed them both, it will inevitably cause a backlash from the other clans. No one wants Konoha to have a lawless person who dares to kill the patriarchs of other clans. Then, he took a deep look at Itachi, and a strange smile appeared on his face. From now on, this kid will probably be very persistent with him. This also paved the way for Itachi to enter the Akatsuki. Because Kagami is now wearing the Akatsuki's uniform, if Itachi wants to investigate him, he must choose to join the Akatsuki. Your life is a puppet on the front stage, and I am the person behind you. Sun Wukong will never be able to escape from the palm of the Buddha. Finally, Kagami withdrew his gaze from Itachi, and his body flashed with a golden luster, and as if tearing the space apart, he directly drilled into it and disappeared completely. 1 month later, in the Rain Village, the sky was hazy and hazy. That guy Orochimaru should have agreed to join the Akatsuki, right? In the secret room with dirty light, Wu Chun, who was wearing a mask, looked at Obito. His eyes flashed with a thick light, and then he asked indifferently. Indeed, but Orochimaru didn't have good intentions. He wanted to take Yahiko's Rinnegan, but he was defeated by Pain's Rakudo, so he agreed to join the Akatsuki. Obito said, and it seemed that he was extremely disdainful of Orochimaru's conspiracy, and he ridiculed. Orochimaru's ambition is not small. He was very coveting Uchiha's Sharingan, and now seeing the Rinnegan above the Sharingan and the Byakugan, it's impossible for him not to have evil thoughts. It's Uzumaki Nagato, who is useless. Dustless curled his lips under the mask, and he was extremely disdainful of Uzumaki Nagato. Since he had the Rinnegan, many people had ideas about him. At first, it was Dustless himself, then it was the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, and now it was Orochimaru. He's really not good. With his body like that, he can't exert the power of the Rinnegan at all. On this point, Obito and Dustless's views were quite similar. They both thought that Uzumaki Nagato was not good. Others only needed to use chakra to activate the power of the Rinnegan, but Uzumaki Nagato had to go all out. This is also the reason why they didn't match. After all, the owner of the Rinnegan was Madara, so Uzumaki Nagato was naturally more difficult to use. But then again, staring at Dustless, Obito said, Uchiha Itachi of Konoha has agreed to join the Akatsuki, and in exchange, he will destroy the Uchiha. But his condition is that he can't attack Konoha and the Kyubis. Promise him Obito. The other half of the Kyubi has been bound by me in the Gedomazo. Even without the yang chakra of the Kyubi, it doesn't matter. Dustless waved his hand and said resolutely, the chakra of the Kyubi will not be a big deal, and the Jubi can still be resurrected as usual. Moreover, Dustless's ambition is not the so-called Jubi's Jinchuriki. For him, becoming the Jubi's Jinchuriki is meaningless. The so-called different realm, people's vision also changes. Today, Dustless just wants to replace Kagaya, or completely devour her, not become the so-called Jinchuriki. Chapter 156. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, a few days passed. During this period, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha became more and more intense. Uchiha Fugaku's will was changed by Dustless's Izanagi, and he once again became the ambitious Fugaku of the past. Nowadays, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha is like dry wood and fire. As long as someone deliberately adds some sparks, the situation between the two sides will be set off. However, even so, both sides still maintain the greatest restraint. Killing 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 of your own men is a simple and clear truth, and these old foxes understand it. The Uchiha is recognized as the strongest clan in Konoha, and there are many strong people in the clan. Even after its destruction, Konoha's own strength will be greatly damaged, and it may also have other effects. If a top clan wants to be destroyed, then other clans will think the same, and it's inevitable that they will be prepared for danger. Rice Bucket, a bunch of useless trash. In the dark environment, Shimura Danzo looked at his subordinates with murderous intent in his eyes, and his whole body was trembling with anger. At this moment, he was like a dying beast, giving off a gloomy and terrifying feeling. It's no wonder that Shimura Danzo was so angry. He originally planned to seize Uchiha Shursue's eyes, but in the end, he didn't get anything. Instead, he was responsible for sending the unconscious Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Itachi back to the Uchiha's base. Those who don't know Shinzo Shursue's ulterior motives will inevitably splash dirty water on him. Danzo-sama, Uchiha Shursue's whereabouts have not been found yet. It's as if he has evaporated from the world, and there is no trace of him at all. The root ninja, who was half kneeling on the ground, looked at Danzo cautiously. Even if their inner feelings have been obliterated by Danzo's inhumane training, they couldn't help but feel fear in the face of Danzo's anger. This old man doesn't want to listen to your explanation. Is it possible that he has been killed? Shimura Danzo's face was full of murderous intent as he roared angrily. Of course, he wouldn't kill his most loyal subordinates. After all, he spent many years training them, and they were absolutely loyal to him. Is Uchiha Shursui really dead? Shimura Danzo couldn't help but think to himself. If Shursui was really killed, then it's understandable that they couldn't find his body. Root's intelligence network is almost all over Konoha, so as long as Shursui is still in Konoha, they should be able to find him. Forget it. Don't make a move against the Uchiha for the time being, and remember to secretly monitor the Kyubi. Shimura Danzo was no longer entangled in this matter, and his passion for the Uchiha also cooled down. Casually attacking the Uchiha would cause a lot of trouble, and it might even cause a war between Konoha and the Uchiha, which would not be worth the loss. This is interesting. I didn't expect Danzo to be so sensible. It's rare. It seems that he's grown up. He's not as brainless as before. Hidden in the root, Kagami's mouth curled into a smile. Danzo used to be extremely cunning and reckless, and whenever he mentioned the Uchiha, he would get angry, but now it's rare for him to know when to advance or retreat. It seems that both Konoha and the Uchiha have maintained the greatest restraint, but let me be the one to ignite your war. With a cold smile on his face, Kagami's body suddenly disappeared. Dustless, who was controlling Kagami from the Rain Village, was filled with endless killing intent. Uzumaki Naruto, I'm sorry. Thinking of a plan, Uchiha Kagami's eyes flashed with determination. Uzumaki Naruto's childhood was miserable. It's simply a metaphor for tragedy. Although he sympathized with Uzumaki Naruto's life, he was in a different position, and in this cruel world, there was no market for sympathy. In the dead of night, a vigorous black shadow shuttled through Konoha's ninja village, and a ghostly figure flashed straight ahead. It was Kagami, controlled by Dustless. As long as I release the power of the Sharingan to control the Kyuubi in Uzumaki Naruto's body and make him attack Konoha again. Thinking of this, Kagami's lips curled into a cold smile. Now, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha is extremely sensitive, and both sides are full of gunpowder. If the Kyuubi comes out again and is controlled by the Sharingan, the consequences are self-evident, and I'm afraid that even if Konoha can tolerate it, they won't let the Uchiha go. In this way, the Uchiha will die. Who is it? Several ninjas who were monitoring Uzumaki Naruto saw the black shadow rushing over, and suddenly flocked in front of Kagami. These ninjas were not only Umbu, but also Root. Sharingan, are you from the Uchiha clan? The Umbu ninjas and Root ninjas looked at Uchiha Kagami's 3-tomo Sharingan, and their brows under their masks couldn't help but frown secretly. After all, the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha's higher-ups is well known to all. It's good to see it clearly. So you are all the best witnesses. Kagami's mouth twitched into a strange smile, and his 3-tomo Sharingan turned sharply, and in an instant, these ninjas were knocked down. Of course, he didn't kill them. After all, their testimony in the future will be the biggest reason to destroy the Uchiha. After quietly knocking down several people, Kagami immediately entered the room they were guarding. Creak! The door was gently pushed open, and the dark environment was like daytime for Kagami. The furniture and facilities in the room were quite simple, and some of the furniture even had cracks on it. It looked like it had been there for many years. On the ground, there were a lot of cylindrical boxes that were similar to ramen, and there were also a lot of milk bottles. With his excellent vision, Kagami could clearly see that whether it was the ramen or the milk bottles, all of them had expired long ago. In other words, these things were all expired food. It can be seen that Uzumaki Naruto's childhood was so miserable. The dignified 4th Hokage's descendant fell into such a situation, it really makes people sigh at the injustice of the world. Chapter 157. Looking around, Kagami looked at the stairs in front of him. Obviously, it leads to the place where Uzumaki Naruto slept upstairs. Kagami walked over. You're really an optimistic person. I hope you can persist in the future and add some vitality to this boring world. Kagami looked at the sleeping Uzumaki Naruto with his 3-tomo tomo. Kagami was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled with relief. This kid is indeed the most charming and bewitching person in the world. The number of people who were defeated by Uzumaki Naruto's mouth is no less than 5. Well, who are you? Seeming to be aware of someone's gaze, Uzumaki Naruto rubbed his sleepy eyes and tried to open them, looking at Kagami's indifferent face in a daze. You actually woke up. Kagami looked at Uzumaki Naruto in surprise. Then his eyes flashed with indifference, and he said faintly, Kid, it's better for you to sleep. After saying that, without waiting for Uzumaki Naruto to answer, he used his Sharingan to make Uzumaki Naruto fall asleep again. This kid is weak because of Kyuubi's interference, and now his ability to resist Genjutsu is extremely poor. Kagami's spiritual power also successfully invaded Uzumaki Naruto's spiritual world. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The world in his line of sight suddenly changed, and the scene in front of him was completely different from before. It was a strange place made up of countless sewers, and the ground was full of water. Whoosh! At this moment, a strong gust of wind blew towards Kagami's face, causing his clothes to swell up. This gust of wind contained endless killing intent and boundless negative emotions, especially filled with unprecedented hatred. It gave the feeling of an irreconcilable enemy, as if he was full of hatred towards the whole world. This violent chakra, it seems to be Kyuubi. Feeling chakra's calamity, Uchiha Kagami frowned slightly, then looked at the passage in front of him and walked towards it. The nine-tailed beast was the absolute overlord of the tailed beasts. Even though the attribute chakra had been stripped away and only had half of its power left, the amount of chakra was still unimaginable. It was an absolute existence that was unparalleled. Even if it was only a small amount of chakra, it was not inferior to the eight-tailed beast. It might even be more powerful than the eight-tailed beast. It was enough to show how powerful the nine-tailed beast was. Soon, Uchiha Kagami arrived at a spacious place. In front of the red railing, there was an orange monster sleeping leisurely with its nine tails swaying in the wind. Looking at its expression, it seemed to be quite comfortable. Compared to before, when he was controlled by this monster and had no human rights, animal rights, although he was in prison now, he still had some dignity. Uchiha Kagami, it's been a while since we last met. You sure know how to enjoy life. Appearing in front of the red railing like a ghost, Uchiha Kagami looked at the bound Kyuubi and smiled slightly. He immediately looked at the jutsu on the railing that sealed the Kyuubi, and contempt flashed in his eyes. Who are you? 3 Tomo Sharingan. Are you from the Uchiha clan? Chakra opened its eyes, revealing a huge scarlet eye filled with hatred. Staring at the figure in front of it, the Kyuubi's 9 tails swayed even more casually. You know me? Looking at Uchiha Kyuubi with contempt, its pupils suddenly shrank, emitting a dangerous cold light. Its huge claws slammed on the ground, and the whole space trembled fiercely. The Kyuubi's expression became extremely ferocious. Get over here, let me tear you apart, damn Uchiha brat. Kyuubi's sharp roar exploded like a shockwave, blowing many cracks in the surrounding walls. His scarlet cross eyes emitted monstrous killing intent, and the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. The degree of resentment increased by several levels. If one had to say who the Kyuubi hated the most, it would undoubtedly be the Uchiha clan. The Kyuubi was initially controlled by Uchiha Madara, then by Uchiha Bito, and then by Dustless using the Gedomazo to extract his Ina tribute chakra. His strength was greatly reduced, so naturally he hated the Uchiha. Don't worry, I will release your seal soon. Uchiha Kyuubi faintly glanced at the Kyuubi, and then whispered, but I have to suppress all your strength. Otherwise, that brat Uzumaki Naruto might be swallowed by you, so you can really escape from this cage. Suppress my strength? The Kyuubi was so angry that he laughed. His body lying on the ground suddenly stood up, revealing his huge body. His scarlet eyes stared at Uchiha Kyuubi's indifferent face, and the tail behind him swayed more wildly, as if laughing at Uchiha Kyuubi's arrogance. Then he stretched out his arm, revealing his sharp claws, and looked at Uchiha Kyuubi contemptuously. With a sneer on his fox-like face, he disdainfully ridiculed. Trash like you, Kyuubi, can kill 5 of you with 1 claw. It's no wonder that the Kyuubi was so angry. He looked at Uchiha Kyuubi angrily. Even when Uchiha Madara defeated him, the Kyuubi expressed his dissatisfaction. In his eyes, Uchiha Madara used the evil Sharingan to control him. Even if he couldn't defeat him, he should at least keep his dignity. Is that so? It seems that you have been living quite leisurely these past few years, and your brain is not working well. You even seem to have forgotten the person who sealed the other half of your strength, Kyuubi. As his words fell, Uchiha Kyuubi's right eye began to distort violently, and the dark blue Tensigen was obvious. Don't tell me your Kyuubi's eyes stared at the dark blue luster of the right eye, and suddenly remembered the masked man who forcibly extracted his Een attribute, Chakramazo, a few years ago, and his expression suddenly stiffened. Uchiha Kyuubi's eyes were like torches, and he looked contemptuously at the Kyuubi who was on guard against him. He immediately raised his head slightly and saw the seal above, and his eyes flashed with a touch of frivolity. I will let you out, beast. Chapter 158. Seeing the Kyuubi looking at him with fear, Kagami didn't care and just smiled. He didn't even care about the seal above him. A golden light flashed in his palm as he stared at the red railings in front of him. The golden light cut through the void and destroyed the enchantment that bound the QB. Ouch! A deafening whistling sound came from the front, bringing with it a scorching wave of air that wreaked havoc like a hurricane. The water flowing on the ground was quickly evaporated. Looking up, QB saw a giant black bijadama in his mouth. Useless fellow, this kind of powerless trick is completely useless against me. After so many years, I thought that you would more or less understand my abilities, but it seems that I thought too much. You are still as stupid as before. Looking up, QB faintly looked at the giant bijadama and shook his head. He looked at the QB and then looked away again, turning a deaf ear to the bijadama. Would release. Would ball jutsu. Boom. 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 Suddenly, a thick green wood ball appeared under the QB's feet. It wrapped around the QB like a snake, making him unable to move and quickly absorbing the chakra of the QB. Since Dustless absorbed the chakra of Hashirama, he awakened the wood release in his body. Since he has the power of both the Uchiha and the Senju, he was even more proficient than Hashirama, the creator of wood release. Crack! The nine-tailed beast opened its huge mouth full of fangs, emitting a foul smell. It then bit at the wood puppet's head, biting off the wood puppet's head that was bound to its body. It's useless. How can wood release be so weak? Seeing QB's head being bitten off, QB's face was expressionless. In the blink of an eye, a new QB's head quickly grew out, binding the QB with a more powerful and ferocious force. The QB was like a bottomless black hole, swallowing the QB's chakra. The orange evil chakra was constantly being devoured by the wood ball, and the QB's chakra was constantly being absorbed by the wood ball. The QB's strong body quickly withered, and his expression was extremely sluggish as he fell to the ground powerlessly like a dead dog. Sure enough, the so-called infinite chakra is just SOSO. QB's chakra is huge, but it's not unlimited, especially after half of the QB's chakra was taken away. The QB's S chakra was even weaker than before. Whoosh! When QB was about to release the QB's power, a golden light suddenly flashed past him and went straight towards the QB. Boom! Looking around, the blue chakra energy ball directly destroyed the wood ball on the QB's body, and the scattered fragments of the wood ball splashed on the ground like snowflakes. What a haunting man! Namake's Minato. Looking at the man's back in the distance, especially the Haori behind him that was clearly flowing with the fourth Hokage's shadow, and his golden hair that was as warm as the sun, there was no doubt about his identity. QB's face was calm, and he was calm. He already knew that Minato would appear, but even if he did, it wouldn't change anything. Are you surprised? The first person to liberate you turned out to be me? Looking at Minato with a smile, QB teased him. This kid probably thought that the person who should come was Uzumaki Naruto, not QB. You shouldn't be the masked man from before. His dark blue eyes showed endless wisdom. Minato frowned slightly, and then said very rationally, the difference between Dustless and the person in front of him was too big. You're smart. QB gently smiled, and he wasn't surprised. Minato was such a keen and smart person. When he confronted Obito, he easily saw the weakness of Kamui. From this, one could see how deep his wisdom was. However, QB's voice suddenly turned cold, and he said sarcastically, I can tell you clearly that you can't do anything now. Do you think you can still be the savior of the world like before? That's not clear. Minato just smiled gently at QB's sarcasm, and then looked at Chakra's recovered QB, and he was relieved. Damn bastard, I will not let you go. Staring at QB, QB said fiercely. In fact, he didn't have the confidence, but he still had to keep up appearances. After all, this was Uzumaki Naruto's spiritual world. There was no escape, and QB was guarding it, so the chance of escaping was almost zero. You won't let me go? Hearing this, QB sneered at QB's stupid fox, and he couldn't help but be speechless. It was as if he and QB's positions were switched. You don't know how to live. QB frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. QB printed with one hand, and red lines appeared in the corner of his eyes, and a huge natural chakra floated around his body. Senjutsu, bright god gate. Bang, bang, bang. Kyubi, who had just risen, was immediately subdued by the red roundwood falling from the sky. His 9 tails were tightly suppressed, and his neck and hands were also suppressed by the red roundwood. Kyubi's awe-inspiring chakra also disappeared, and the chakra that was sealed by the bright god gate stopped flowing all over his body, and he became a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. As for Minato, he was even worse. He stayed here to gather chakra, and his existence was similar to a clone. In fact, when he used Rasengan to help Kyubi escape, he used chakra. So, he was directly crushed by the bright god gate that fell from the sky. Chapter 159. The Kyubi's body was tightly bound by the red wooden pillar, and he couldn't move at all. His chakra was imprisoned, and he couldn't mobilize chakra at all. The Kyubi, known as the infinite chakra, became an ordinary beast for a while. Bastard. Kyubi's face was pale when he noticed that his chakra was drained, and his huge eyes looked at Dustless. He could clearly feel the power of the wood release binding him. Who are you? You have the Rinnegan, Mangekyo, and even the wood release. Although I don't know the origin of that blue eye, I feel that it's not inferior to the Rinnegan, Kyubi asked gloomily, and he felt that it was unbelievable. There have only been 3 dojutsu in the ninja world since ancient times, but Uchiha Kagami's right eye, that dark blue eye, was obviously not much different from the Rinnegan. You're just a beast, but you're unexpectedly talkative. Looking at the Kyubi's spittle flying all over the sky, Uchiha Kyubi seemed to be tired, and he casually found a place to sit down, then gently rubbed his temples with both hands, and after sorting out his thoughts, he looked at the Kyubi with a smile. Well, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll answer your questions. Looking at the motionless Kyubi lying on the ground, Uchiha Kyubi whispered, and when he was about to speak, the Kyubi's hoarse and cold voice sounded first. If I'm not wrong, you should want to resurrect the Jubi and get the power to fight alongside the 6 paths, but I advise you not to waste your time. The Jubi's power is too strong, and it's not something you can control. The 6 paths was afraid of the power of the Jubi, so he used the Yin-Yang release to split the Jubi into 9-tailed beasts. If the Jubi is resurrected, the world will be destroyed, the Kyubi said in a depressed tone. As one of the Jubi's forces, he naturally knew the power of the Jubi. Although this is just his guess, he can confirm that Uchiha Kyubi's goal is the Jubi, and only the huge power of the Jubi can make Uchiha Kyubi so crazy. Some time ago, the other half of his Yin attribute chakra was sealed by the heretic demon statue, which indirectly explained everything. Did I hear wrongly? As an amalgamation of negative emotions, Ninetales is actually worried about the safety of the entire world. How comical. Looking at Kyubi's serious face, Kagami's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. This is not something you can worry about. The so-called bijou exists to resurrect the Jubi. Apart from that, do you think the existence of the bijou has any value? Staring at the man-eating Kyubi, Kagami said indifferently, "This is the essence of the existence of bijou. If it wasn't for the fact that I needed you to resurrect the Jubi, I would have killed you a few years ago." Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Kagami in the Rain Village, sneered. To be honest, if he didn't need the Kyubi, he would have already disposed of this annoying fox as garbage. You should be happy that you have a part in my script, Kyubi. Looking down at the murderous Kyubi, Kagami said inexplicably, giving people a feeling that they didn't understand, but in Kyubi's ears, it actually meant something else. What do you mean? As the absolute supreme of the bijou, Kyubi was not only powerful, but also quite intelligent, no worse than humans. So naturally, he could understand what Dustless meant, and then he understood Kagami's meaning. That kid shouldn't be of any use to you. At least he absolutely doesn't have this ability now. The kid Kyubi was talking about was naturally Uzumaki Naruto. Because of his deliberate interference, Naruto's strength was pitifully weak, and he couldn't even use the most basic ninjutsu. Obviously, Kyubi had no use for someone like Kagami, whose strength was unprecedented, and who could shatter the world with a snap of his fingers. TSK. Don't underestimate that kid so much. It's just that he has you in his body, so I spent so much effort. As we all know, only the Uchiha Sharingan can control Bijou. Kyubi smacked his lips and then said with a sinister smile in his eyes, which made the sluggish Kyubi feel uncomfortable. What is your purpose? Kyubi looked at Kyubi puzzledly and asked. Using the Sharingan to control that kid Uzumaki Naruto to attack Konoha, and all this will be blamed on the Uchiha. Don't you think it's interesting? In the end, Kyubi's face was full of sneers. The Umbu who guarded Uzumaki Naruto's safety before was the best testimony. They saw with their own eyes that he was an Uchiha clan member, using the Sharingan to control Uzumaki Naruto to attack Konoha with the power of a Bijou. In this way, Konoha's higher-ups will completely tear off their face and attack the Uchiha clan. In order to avoid the outbreak of civil war, Uchiha Itachi will definitely take the initiative to eliminate the Uchiha and join the Akatsuki. Uchiha Itachi will embark on the script that Dustless designed for him. What a vicious plan. Hearing this, Kyubi's old face changed dramatically, and he took a deep breath. Although he hated the Uchiha clan very much, he couldn't help but sweat for Kyubi's madness. According to the current situation, Konoha and the Uchiha clan will go to war sooner or later. But now that Uchiha Shursue's whereabouts are unknown, many Uchiha clan members have already sprouted the idea of retreating, not wanting to go to war with Konoha's higher-ups. Now, Kyubi is doing this, controlling the Bijou that can only be controlled by the Sharingan to attack Konoha again. It can be said that he has completely pushed the Uchiha clan to the edge of the storm and will completely destroy them. Vicious. Hearing this, Kyubi sneered again and again, revealing half of his face, and looked at Kyubi with one eye, and said with a sinister smile, "People like them can sacrifice for my plan. This is the greatest favor that God has given them." Chapter 160. Anyway, the end of the Uchiha clan will be exterminated. It's the supreme honor of their clan to become a crucial part of his plan. You lunatic, shut up, beast. Kyubi's eyes were cold, and the Sharingan in his pupils turned sharply. A huge amount of eye power invaded Kyubi's mind, and he was easily controlled. Kyubi was just a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered in front of Kyubi. There was no room for him to fight back. Kyubi's soul seemed to have been sucked out, and he became extremely obedient, lying on the ground motionless, and his scarlet pupils turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan. Obviously, Kyubi has been completely controlled by Kagami. Now it's time to control the little devil with my Sharingan. In the empty world, Kyubi's long sigh sounded, and then his whole body glowed with golden light. In less than a breath, Kyubi disappeared completely, leaving only Kyubi with a calm face. Kyubi's sight suddenly changed back to the room where Uzumaki Naruto was sleeping. "Little devil, get up." As Uchiha Kagami's voice fell, Uzumaki Naruto opened his eyes. His dark blue eyes were gray, without any vitality. Obviously, he was deliberately controlled by Uchiha Kagami. It seems that there shouldn't be any accidents. After looking down at Uzumaki Naruto's body, Kyubi nodded with satisfaction and immediately launched his eye power again. Uzumaki Naruto's body suddenly froze, his pupils enlarged, and turned into the same 3 Tomo Sharingan. There's still one more level. With a strange smile on his face, Kyubi printed with one hand. After a long silence, Uzumaki Naruto's body suddenly covered with a fiery red chakra coat. Uzumaki Naruto's expression instantly became ferocious, and the beard on both sides of his face became long and thick. His pupils stared at Kyubi, and his breathing became abnormally heavy. His whole body was full of extremely powerful, killing intent. It's enough to keep 3 tails. Too many will only be counterproductive. Looking down at the 3 red tails on Uzumaki Naruto's body, Kagami nodded slightly. Although he can control the Kyubi to release more power to Uzumaki Naruto, there's a chance that the Kyubi will break out of the seal, and the easier it is to make a mistake, the more power of the Kyubi will be given to Uzumaki Naruto, which means that he will need more power. I'm looking forward to your performance, Uzumaki Naruto. Looking at Uzumaki Naruto with his fangs and 3 Tomo Sharingan, Uchiha Kagami smiled slightly. I'm afraid that after this incident, this kid will be even more disliked by Konoha. Go! Whoosh! Naruto Uzumaki Naruto, or Dustless who is behind Naruto Kyuubi's, and Sure-san Dustless Naruto, who is Sure-san Shisubi, is Naruto's show, Sure-san Sure-sui, or Sure-sui, is Naruto, and the Uchiha clan controlling the Kyuubi to attack Root Danzo. Although it is somewhat unreasonable, it is at least reasonable. The Uchiha clan doesn't like Danzo, and Danzo also doesn't like the Uchiha clan. It's not like the two sides have never fought in the past. This time, the Uchiha clan controlling the Kyuubi is also reasonable. Boom! Boom! Looking into the distance, in the area of the Root's base, a huge mushroom cloud suddenly appeared in the void. In an instant, the dark night sky was dyed crimson red. The temperature instantly increased by more than 100 times, and the blazing heat wave that burst out was even more destructive. It was like a magnitude 10 earthquake, directly shaking the entire Konoha. The crimson flames dyed the sky of Konoha red. A young man with a red coat and 3 tails behind him raged like a ghost. As the leader of Root, Shimura Danzo was awakened for the first time. He quickly climbed to the window and looked at the crimson night sky in the distance, and his old face directly turned green. He quickly tidied up his clothes and rushed to Root's base. No matter who you are, this old man will tear you to pieces. In the dark night sky, Shimura Danzo didn't even call his guards and rushed alone to the center of the incident. Root is his life's work, and it must not be destroyed. At the same time, the deafening explosion just now awakened the entire Konoha, and the people who were sleeping quickly got dressed and prepared to hide in the tunnels prepared by their homes. A few years ago, Dustless and Obito attacked Konoha, especially Dustless's meteorite shower, which shocked everyone in Konoha, from the Hokage to the ordinary people, so everyone started to dig tunnels. The power is a bit weak. If it was the Kyuubi's Bijidama, I'm afraid Konoha would have been blown up. Looking at the big pit caused by the Bijidama explosion in the distance, Uchiha Kagami shook his head and said regretfully, and then disappeared from Uzumaki Naruto's room, leaving nothing in the empty room. The agile fiery red shadow roared unscrupulously. At this moment, Uzumaki Naruto no longer looked like a human being. He was completely devoured by Kyuubi. He killed everyone he saw and destroyed everything. He was like a killing machine harvesting the lives of the Root members. This is the Kyuubi. Danzo rushed over and looked at the miserable state of Root, and he was furious, and immediately looked at the figure in the distance, wearing a crimson coat and spewing out the evil chakra, and his face was extremely ugly. The power of the Kyuubi is known all over the world. Fortunately, its 3 tails, otherwise, thinking of this, Shimura Danzo's back was cold, and he couldn't help but feel a chill. The power of the Kyuubi has no limit, and it can easily destroy Konoha's ninja village. I can take this opportunity to absorb the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki into my Root. With a flash of light in his mind, Shimura Danzo's eyes narrowed slightly, and after looking at the Kyuubi for a while, his expression suddenly stiffened. Isn't that the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan? Chapter 161. Returning to his senses, Shimura Danzo angrily looked at Uzumaki Naruto's 3-tomo Sharingan. He saw the tragedy of Root, and his face twitched fiercely. His anger was like an erupting volcano, and his mind was constantly being burned by his anger. Shimura Danzo gritted his teeth, and a terrifying black smoke appeared behind him. Decades of hard work turned into ashes. How could he not be angry? Danzo, this is the Sandaime Hokage, Sir Toby, also arrived in time, and when he saw the Root corpses everywhere, he couldn't help but take a deep breath, and he asked gloomily, "Who did this?" The Sandaime's tone was full of anger and surprise, and his old face was also extremely ugly, but in his heart, he was very happy. Although the death of the Root clan's members caused a great loss to Konoha's strength, there was no war at the moment, and Konoha's population was more than enough, and these ninjas could be replaced in a few years. Anyway, Root didn't obey the orders of the Hokage, and only listened to the orders of Shimura Danzo. Even if Shimura Danzo asked Root to assassinate him, these people wouldn't hesitate to do it. It can be said that Root is the biggest hidden danger of Konoha. Who is it? Look at who it is. Hearing this, Shimura Danzo looked at Sandaime Hokage with an annoyed expression, then pointed at Uzumaki Naruto and said coldly, "The Uchiha clan is indeed the biggest unstable factor in the village. They must be eliminated." Shimura Danzo said with unprecedented determination, and his tone was resolute, without the slightest sign of retreat, which made the Sandaime frown deeply, and he also looked at Naruto. Naruto turned out to be controlled by the Sharingan. Sandaime Hokage looked at Naruto's vague silhouette in surprise. At this moment, he was completely swallowed by the power of the Bijou, but his scarlet eyes were very recognizable. His eyes flashed with a hint of understanding. Danzo and the Uchiha didn't deal with each other, and now that the Uchiha used the Sharingan to control the Kyuubi, how could he not be angry? There may be other reasons for this. After the mysterious disappearance of Uchiha Shisui, although the Uchiha were still unusually restless, they were no longer as excessive as before. Now that the Uchiha suddenly launched an attack, the third Hokage had to consider other aspects. "Calm down. Maybe there's something else." The Sandaime tried to persuade Shimura Danzo, but he was interrupted by Shimura Danzo. "Calm down my ass." Shimura Danzo's anger, and he was like a hungry wolf, and he bit by bit, he said with hatred, "Sarutobi, facts speak louder than words. You know Uzumaki Naruto's eyes. Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto's eyes. This, Naruto's eyes is Naruto, Uzumaki's Naruto's Sharingan, and it's Naruto's Naruto's eyes. Eyes. Humph, I'm telling you, even if you don't agree, I will join forces with the two advisors to destroy the Uchiha." Seeing that Sarutobi was still hesitating, Shimura Danzo's heart hardened, and he said with a murderous look on his face, "A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. The Uchiha clan will not be spared." Boom! The small black Bijidama roared again, and suddenly, a huge pit appeared on the ground, and the soil splashed everywhere, taking the lives of many unimportant people. We'll talk about the Uchiha later. For now, we need to take him down. Sandaime Hokage didn't want to provoke Danzo. This old guy is one of the strongest people in the world. It's impossible to make him back down. Instead of wasting his breath, it's better to take down Uzumaki Naruto, who is controlled by the Sharingan. You don't need to tell me this, I understand. After glancing at Sarutobi coldly, Shimura Danzo retracted his gaze and looked at Uzumaki Naruto coldly. His murderous intent surged out of his body as he took the initiative to rush toward Uzumaki Naruto. His body was like a reservoir that was constantly overflowing with chakra. He didn't hold back at all. Obviously, he was serious. It seems that things are troublesome. Lowering the brim of the Hokage's hat and looking at Shimura Danzo, Sarutobi's eyes flashed with a headache. This just shows that this incident has completely enraged him, and there's no room for negotiation. Let's take it one step at a time. The Sandaime couldn't think of a good plan. He could only sigh, and then he rushed toward Uzumaki Naruto. Unfortunately, the show is coming to an end. Uchiha Kagami, who was secretly watching from a distance, naturally saw the movements of the Sandaime and Danzo. The strength of these two people is quite good, especially the Sandaime, who has the title of Ninjutsu Professor. His strength is unfathomable. Facing a group of strong people from Konoha, Uzumaki Naruto, who only has 3 tails, will definitely lose. But the plan is finally completed. Next, Konoha will attack Konoha, and Uchiha Itachi will eliminate the Uchiha clan in order to avoid civil war in Konoha. As a condition, Uchiha Sasuke cannot be killed. Uchiha Kagami muttered to himself, and then he smiled faintly, and his body quickly disappeared, turning into a golden light that penetrated into the void and disappeared. The Kyubi was once again controlled by the Sharingan to attack Konoha, and it's such a sensitive moment. The Uchiha clan can't stay out of it, especially before controlling Uzumaki Naruto. Uchiha Kagami deliberately left a few people alive, and these people's testimonies will be the best evidence for the Uchiha clan. All in all, the Uchiha clan has been completely pushed to hell, and no one can save them. The Uchiha clan can only break their teeth and swallow this matter, not to mention that they were already suspected. Chapter 162. The next morning, the sun shone brightly for thousands of miles. The warm sun poured down from the 9 heavens, nourishing all living things. The entire world seemed to be in a flourishing state. However, Konoha's ninja village was gloomy. Inside the Hokage's office, there was a dense atmosphere. Looking around, all of the high-level people of Konoha were present. They were definitely the best people in Konoha, and if they stomped their feet, Konoha would tremble. Uchiha clan must be eradicated. Shimura Danzo was the first to lose his cool and roared hysterically. Although this old guy usually gave people the impression of being the scheming type, because of the tragic loss of Root yesterday, he completely went berserk. How's Naruto's condition? Sandame, who was calmly smoking a cigarette, suddenly asked with a soft and caring tone, which reduced the tension a lot. It seems that there is no problem. Udatane Koharu, one of the 2 consultants, said, and then looked at the other consultant, Mido Kato Hamura, who nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. Saratobi, I suggest that we implement Danzo's order and immediately deal with the Uchiha. Creak. However, at this moment, the door of the Hokage's office was suddenly pushed open, revealing a handsome young man wearing an umbu uniform with a slender tachi on his back. Saratobi, what do you mean? Shimura Danzo looked at Sandame Hokage with an unkind expression. They were originally on the same level, and because of Uzumaki Naruto's destruction yesterday, Shimura Danzo's tone was naturally very harsh, especially after seeing the young man in front of him. His eyes were filled with anger. The ninja wearing the umbu uniform was Uchiha Itachi. Itachi, you came, sit down. Ignoring Shimura Danzo's dissatisfaction, the Hokage smiled kindly at Itachi. His old face showed a kind and gentle smile, giving the feeling of a neighbor's grandfather. Pretentious old man, you're better at acting than me. Don't think I don't know that you use this method to deceive Uchiha Dustless. Seeing that the relationship between the Hokage and Itachi was so harmonious, Shimura Danzo sneered in his heart. He glanced at Itachi, then retracted his gaze and closed his eyes. Hiruzen, what do you mean by this? Staring at the indifferent Uchiha Itachi, one of the 2 consultants, Mido Kato Hamura's face was ugly. He just wanted to persuade the Hokage to deal with the Uchiha clan, but the Hokage called the Uchiha in front of him, which was tantamount to a slap in his face. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Mido Kato Hamura looked at the Hokage. Don't worry about such details. Itachi is one of us. He is the same as Uchiha Goku, Shursui, and his big brother Uchiha Goku. His vision has jumped out of the narrow-minded clansman and is sincerely for the people of the village. The Hokage smiled faintly and waved his hand with great momentum, and Mido Kato Hamura was silent. Uchiha Kagami, the Hokage, Shimura Danzo, Udatane, and Mido Kato Hamura were all people of the same generation, and they were also part of the same group. Uchiha Kagami was Uchiha Shursue's father, and his vision jumped out of the narrow Uchiha clan and sincerely served Konoha. Unfortunately, he died in the First Shinobi World War. As his son, Uchiha Shursui also inherited the will of Uchiha Kagami and chose to serve Konoha. As for Uchiha Dustless, Itachi's eldest brother, he sincerely helped Konoha, and with his own strength, he destroyed thousands of sand ninjas and pulled Konoha from the edge of hell. His contribution was even greater than Uchiha Kagami and Shursue's. It's a pity that Dustless was killed by the Akatsuki, the mercenary organization hired by the Rock Village. Otherwise, in the future, he would have been a giant tree that could support Konoha, the Hokage said bitterly. If it weren't for Dustless destroying the Sand Village, maybe Konoha would have been erased from the map by now. Don't you know Dustless, Itachi? Looking at Itachi's confused face, it seemed like he understood but also didn't understand. The Hokage asked curiously. In any case, Dustless is Itachi's eldest brother. Even if they are strangers, even if they have never seen each other's face, it shouldn't be like this, as if it's the first time he heard about him. Even Shimura Danzo and Konoha's two consultants looked at Itachi strangely. That's not it. Itachi shook his head. He also asked Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto about Dustless's deeds, but both of them were silent. Mikoto's face was full of complex guilt, but Fugaku's expression was worth studying. Sometimes it was hatred, sometimes it was complicated, sometimes it was regret, sometimes it was sighing. In short, it was almost all kinds of expressions that Itachi could describe. Therefore, Itachi didn't know much about Dustless's deeds, and what he knew was just hearsay. He only knew that Dustless was the first person to awaken the Man-GQ Sharingan in the history of Konoha, and that he destroyed the Sand Village with overwhelming power, and was praised as a great hero who saved Konoha, but later he was besieged and killed. You only have yourself to blame. You can't blame others. Seeing that Itachi didn't know anything, Shimura Danzo immediately sneered. It was obvious that Fugaku deliberately concealed his grievances with Dustless and had a contemptuous attitude. Danzo was very disdainful of Fugaku's actions. If Dustless stayed in the Uchiha clan, Shimura Danzo swore that he would never do anything to the Uchiha. Well, I will explain to you some of the deeds of your brother Dustless. The Hokage smiled slightly and immediately fell into his memories and began to recall the past of Dustless. Chapter 163. Hearing that Sandaime Hokage was going to introduce him to Wuchin's story, Itachi became interested. He was naturally very curious about his elder brother, whom he had never met in his life, and his parents avoided talking about him. Although Itachi was usually indifferent to fame and fortune, and the so-called reputation was like floating clouds, and he had no distractions, the people around him inevitably compared him with Uchiha Wuchin, and inevitably had an indescribable attachment to Wuchin in his heart. Dustless. The Sandaime began to recall Dustless's past, and after a while he suddenly shook his head and said softly, Dustless is a poor child, and some things are related to his and Fugaku's private affairs. I can't say. He is similar to Madara in the past. Both of them are people who pursue power very much. Of course, this is also related to your parents. Itachi heard this and nodded. Although Fugaku avoided some things, he was good at thinking, and combined with other people's words, it wasn't difficult to come up with a theory. Dustless is very strong. If it wasn't for Inoki's despicable tricks, I'm afraid no one would be his opponent. And the people of Akatsuki are also unfathomable. They could even kill Dustless. The Sandaime said with a heavy tone, Dustless was stronger than him, but the leader of Akatsuki was able to kill Dustless. His strength was self-evident. He even mercilessly said that if he could kill Wuchin, he could also kill him, the third Hokage. Sandaime-sama means Uchiha Itachi is also a smart person, and his mind is agile. Compared to Sandaime, who is over 50 years old, he is naturally much smarter. His eyes flashed with understanding. Sandaime wants me to enter the Akatsuki. This kid is quite smart. Shimura Danzo and Konoha's two advisors looked at each other, and they could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. At the same time, their eyes lit up as they thought that Itachi's plan to infiltrate the Akatsuki was indeed a good one. Although the identity of the people who attacked Konoha a few years ago is unknown, but judging from all the signs, there is no doubt that the people who attacked Konoha are the Akatsuki, because the 5 great shinobi villages were destroyed after the war, and they don't have the ability to do so. Only the Akatsuki, who can even kill Dustless, has the ability to do so. There is also the Uchiha clan. Speaking of this, Sandaime's expression was also extremely complicated. If it weren't for the situation, he would never have issued such a cruel and cold order. After all, The Uchiha have been following the footsteps of Konoha since the beginning of its establishment, and their contributions over the past few decades are known to the world. If it weren't for the Uchiha, maybe Konoha would have already fallen apart. Now that he has to personally order the destruction of the Uchiha clan, he really can't do it. After all, even if the Uchiha clan didn't make any contributions over the years, they have worked hard, but the current situation forced him to make a decision again. Well, Sarutobi, what are you hesitating for? The Uchiha clan is a malignant tumor of evil, and the biggest unstable factor in the peace and stability of Konoha. They must be eliminated. Seeing that the Sandaime was still hesitating, Shimura Danzo immediately stood up and said to Uchiha Itachi, "The Umbu members guarding Uzumaki Naruto were not killed. They have already provided testimony that the murderer is a member of the Uchiha clan. This is an irrefutable fact." Hearing this, Itachi was silent, and his heart was struggling. On one side is the Uchiha clan that he grew up in, and on the other side is the Konoha that he is loyal to. Looking at Itachi with a complicated expression, Sandaime couldn't help but sigh. How could he not understand Itachi's dilemma? Danzo's words just now undoubtedly meant that Itachi should immediately stand on Konoha's side and slaughter the Uchiha's army. After saying that, Shimura Danzo, Udatane, and Minato Haruka stared at Uchiha Itachi with cold light flashing in their eyes. As long as Itachi refuses their conditions, they will step forward to eliminate him. I advise you not to have any ideas. Itachi's sharp and dark eyes swept across the three of them as he said this. Although there was no ki erupting from his body, being stared at by those beast-like eyes made the three of them feel uneasy, and the chakra around their bodies disappeared. Danzo, Udatane Koharu, and Haruka, you have disappointed me too much. Sandaime's eyes were gloomy, and he looked at the three of them with displeasure, especially the two advisors of Shimura Danzo, and there was an unspeakable disgust in his eyes. This is for the future of Konoha. Have you forgotten what Tobarama-sama said? Shimura Danzo looked at the Sandaime without any fear, and his old eyes flashed with a scorching light as he said coldly, "If this continues, sooner or later, a war will break out in the village, and Konoha will become the food of other major powers." Hearing Shimura Danzo's words, Sandaime's expression suddenly stiffened. Indeed, as Shimura Danzo said, although his tone was a bit exaggerated, it was true. If they don't deal with the Uchiha clan first and give them a chance to resist, the consequences will definitely not be something that Konoha, who has just emerged from the shadows, can bear. I can promise you to destroy the Uchiha clan, but I have one condition. You must condition. Ridiculous. Do you think you're qualified to talk to us about conditions? Too naive, Uchiha Itachi. Shimura Danzo looked at Itachi with disdain, and the sneer on the corner of his mouth wasn't concealed at all. The son of the patriarch who was about to be exterminated actually dared to talk about conditions with them, without even understanding the most basic situation. Is that so? Itachi's gaze suddenly turned back, and his blood-red eyes swept past Shimura Danzo, and three scarlet tomo condensed in his pupils, turning into the Manjikyu Sharingan of the Great Windmill. If you don't agree, I don't mind standing on the side of the Uchiha clan. Uchiha Sasuke can't do anything to him, otherwise, after that, chakra materialized around Itachi's body, and a dark red luster covered him. It was Kinsusanoo. Chapter 164. Shimura Danzo stared at the Manjikyu Sharingan in astonishment. Obviously, he didn't expect that Itachi would also open the Manjikyu Sharingan. His eyes flashed with greed. It was precisely because he yearned for the Manjikyu Sharingan of Uchiha that he plotted against him. It turned out to be the Manjikyu Sharingan. If he really stands on the side of the Uchiha, it will inevitably cause a qualitative change. Once a civil war breaks out, I don't know who will win. No, I can't let him stand on the side of the Uchiha clan. Sandaime's old face quickly changed, and he secretly thought. His old eyes flashed, and he quickly made a decision. If Itachi is really forced to the side of the Uchiha clan after the war starts, Konoha will really suffer a great loss. Especially Itachi, who is Dustless's younger brother. Even if his dojutsu is not as good as Dustless, he won't be too weak. Moreover, Itachi's talent is also well known all over the world, and he is no worse than Dustless. State your conditions, Itachi. Taking a deep breath, Sandame's tone was firm. At the same time, he didn't forget to glare at Danzo, indicating that he shouldn't talk nonsense. If Itachi is really forced to the side of the Uchiha clan, the gains won't make up for the losses. Thank you, Sandame. Itachi breathed a sigh of relief and then said in a deep voice, after the destruction of the Uchiha clan, Konoha must treat my brother, Uchiha Sasuke, well, and don't tell him the truth. If there's one person Itachi cares about the most, it's undoubtedly Sasuke. In his short life, he almost always thinks about his brother. Is that all? No problem. I promise to treat Sasuke well, and I won't let him be threatened in any way. Sandame nodded heavily. He didn't expect Uchiha Sasuke's condition to be so simple, and it's not without benefits to keep Uchiha Sasuke in the village. On the contrary, Uchiha Sasuke can serve the village more and care more about the village, and Uchiha Sasuke is also a genius. His eldest brother and second brother are geniuses. There is no reason for him to be a waste. I hope so. Hearing that Itachi's conditions weren't worth mentioning, Shimura Danzo and the two advisors' frowned brows also relaxed. If this kind of trivial matter can let Itachi continue to be tied to Konoha, obviously, they will still make a profit. I will contact the people of that organization as soon as possible. Itachi's brows also relaxed, and then he remembered the Uchiha clan for so many years, and his eyes were full of gloominess. Even if Dustless was cold, he couldn't kill Fugaku and his wife just because he wanted to. This made it more difficult for Itachi, who had always respected them, to kill them. It's a pity, my Sharingan. This means is Itachi's S's and that means is once T's SS will give him. And it's worth considering that Itachi, the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless, can't be weak. As a younger brother of Uchiha Dustless, Itachi can't be weak. Over the years, there's been a puzzle in my heart. Staring at the Sandame, the wisdom in Itachi's eyes converged and was replaced by confusion and even hesitation. Just say it, Itachi, the Sandame said with a smile. Itachi has agreed to his conditions, and the biggest haze in his heart has disappeared. It's like a mountain of tens of thousands of pounds on his back has disappeared, and his body is extraordinarily light and powerful. Uchiha Dustless, is he really dead? Finally, Itachi asked the question in his heart. He frowned slightly and asked the Sandame directly. This question has been bothering him for many years. Dustless's strength is almost deified by Konoha. How can such an unprecedented character die so easily? The smile on the Sandame's face suddenly stiffened, and his face inevitably became gloomy. He had doubts about this issue before, and suspected that Dustless was just seriously injured and hiding somewhere to recuperate. But after so many years, there was no news, and he also thought that Dustless was dead. Well, that kid must be dead. Shimura Danzo heard this and interjected with a tone full of certainty. He firmly believed that Dustless was killed by Uzumaki Nagato. After all, Hanzo the Salamander was killed by Uzumaki Nagato, and the Rinnegan is above the Sharingan. Danzo thought that it was reasonable for Dustless to be killed. Itachi was silent. He didn't know why, but he always felt that Dustless was not dead. That indescribable feeling was especially strong after Shursui was killed last time. Of course, he didn't tell the higher-ups of Konoha about Shursui's death. 3 days later, Rain Village. That kid finally agreed to join the Akatsuki. It took a lot of effort. Looking at the world in the rain, Dustless's voice was unusually indifferent, and beside him was Uchiha Obito. Yes, Obito nodded and frowned slightly, wondering. The reason is that the Kyuubi broke out again, and I heard that it was controlled by the Uchiha clan, so Itachi agreed to the request to the higher-ups of Konoha to destroy the Uchiha clan. However, His condition for joining the Akatsuki is that we are not allowed to do anything to Konoha. It doesn't matter, Obito. Our recent plans have nothing to do with Konoha anyway. Dustless's mouth under the mask showed a scheming smile, and then he suddenly said, "When the time comes, I will personally go to Konoha to welcome Itachi." Obito heard this and looked at Dustless in surprise. It's not that there weren't people who joined the Akatsuki over the years, but Dustless, Kisame, Kakazu, and even Sasori and Orochimaru didn't appear in person. However, Obito was too lazy to ask more. Dustless's presence was the best to prevent some unexpected changes. Chapter 165. Under the dark night sky, a slender, thin, and lonely figure walked alone on the street. Looking at the peaceful crowd in front of him, Itachi's heart completely fell to the bottom, and his eyes were full of tears, even if he hid it very well. People are not plants. How can they be emotionless? What's more, Itachi is the kind of person who values friendship very much. How can he destroy his family or even kill his parents? Can't do it, Itachi. At this moment, the space around Itachi suddenly distorted, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, stirring up waves of ripples, quite mysterious. In the blink of an eye, the mysterious man with a monocular mask flashed strangely out of thin air. This person was wearing a black trench coat embroidered with red clouds. His whole body was airtight, and only one of his eyes could be seen. "I hope you will keep your promise." His pupils shrank. Looking at the mysterious man who appeared in front of him, Itachi said calmly, giving people the feeling that there was no breath of life. He was like a walking corpse in human skin, completely losing his soul, without the meaning of existence, just like a dead body. Perhaps for the current Uchiha Itachi, he was already dead. What a strange ninjutsu. It should be in the category of space ninjutsu, and it looks much weirder than those space ninjutsu. Itachi's eyes swept over the mysterious masked man, and his heart inevitably sank. He didn't expect the Akatsuki to be so mysterious and extraordinary. Even such a character exists. Looking at the world, there are definitely not many people who can use space ninjutsu. Even since the death of the fourth Hokage, no one in the world has heard of anyone who can use space ninjutsu. Maybe he was really killed by the people of this organization. Recalling the cause of Dustless's death in his mind, Itachi suddenly made a decision, and he had a deeper understanding of the danger of the Akatsuki, and there was more fear in his eyes. Of course, they will never do anything to Konoha. The mysterious man smiled, indicating that Itachi didn't need to worry, and then said, "The goal of the Akatsuki is not Konoha, not now, and definitely not in the future. It's just that it might be when you die." A cold smile appeared on his face under the mask, and the masked man secretly added in his heart, "This agreement is useful when Itachi is alive, but it's useless when he's dead. That would be best." Staring at the crowd in front of him, Itachi's eyes flashed fiercely. The sharp tachi on his back was unsheathed, and the cold light was refracted. His scarlet eyes had a demonic luster. At this moment, Itachi restrained all his humanity. He had become a human-shaped machine that only knew how to kill and destroy. So, like a ghost, a shadow rushed out and charged towards the crowd in front of him. He raised his hand and slashed down mercilessly, causing beautiful snowflakes to splash all over the ground. What a cold man. Don't you think so, Obito? Next to the one-eyed masked man, a ghostly shadow flashed out of thin air, looking at the Uchiha clan members who were being slaughtered in front of him, with a wicked smile on his face. His dark eyes were full of interest as he watched Uchiha Itachi mercilessly slaughtering the Uchiha. The one who came was Dustless. But it's really a perfect work. He's destined to live in my shadow for the rest of his life. Dustless's mouth was muttering something, and Uchiha Obito was confused. He didn't understand what it meant. What's the matter with this guy? Why do I have this feeling every time? Secretly clenching his fists, Obito glanced at Dustless from the corner of his eyes, and his heart was particularly depressed. That strange way of appearing just now was obviously not a space ninjutsu. but it felt faster than space ninjutsu. After taking a deep breath and calming down his complicated emotions, Obito also began to think about the origin of Dustless. Although Madara once said that Dustless can be trusted, he still couldn't help but be curious. Especially Dustless's strength. Obito felt powerless every time he faced him. Although he trained himself a lot over the years, he always felt that he would be instantly defeated by Dustless. A few years ago, when Dustless defeated Hashirama, this feeling was even stronger. This is a person more terrifying than Madara. Itachi's strength is really good, and he will definitely be the biggest help in catching the Bijou in the future. Obito said to the masked Dustless. He looked again at the Uchiha, who were almost slaughtered by Itachi, and nodded with satisfaction. He was so strong without using the Manjikyu Sharingan, almost like a wolf in a flock of sheep. After opening the Manjikyu Sharingan, no one would be his opponent. Not bad. Dustless nodded slightly. Itachi's strength was obvious to all. If it weren't for the disease, his future achievements would definitely not be weaker than Sasuke. In the dark night sky, Uchiha Itachi was like the god of death waving his scythe, sweeping through the Uchiha clan with an almost invincible momentum. Although many ninjas resisted, they were mercilessly killed on the spot. In the face of the godlike Uchiha Itachi, the Uchiha clan had almost no power to fight back. The gap between them was too big, completely different. At this moment, Itachi was different from his usual gentle and well-behaved self. His temperament was as cold as a demon. Even if the baby in front of him didn't have the strength to resist, he would still sweep his sword and kill them. Soon, the Uchiha clan was slaughtered by Itachi. Except for Sasuke, who was still outside, almost all the clan members were killed by him. Next, it's your turn. Looking at the largest building in the Uchiha base and the bloody scene, Itachi's heart was like being stabbed by a needle, but he still gritted his teeth and walked over. That was where the Uchiha Fugaku couple lived. Chapter 166. Itachi walked towards Fugaku's mansion with a heavy heart. Looking around, almost the entire Uchiha clan's residence was filled with a strong smell of blood, and the tragic scene of corpses everywhere was particularly shocking. As if they had come to hell, whether men or women, old or young, they were all lying in a pool of blood. The blood-red light shrouded the Uchiha clan's residence, and the scene was tragic. The sky was particularly dim, and the sun and the moon were dim. The entire place was filled with unprecedented desolation. The huge Uchiha clan had completely withdrawn from the stage, and the glory of the past had turned into nothing, vanishing into thin air, becoming a thing of the past. Their feelings were pitiful, and their actions were excusable, but their crimes were punishable. As the most powerful clan in Konoha, the Uchiha clan was naturally superior to other clans, and they spoke with a sense of arrogance that was above others, and it was inevitable that they would offend other clans. This was one of the reasons why even if the entire clan was destroyed, no other clan would speak up for them. A pitiful person must have a pitiful side. Looking at Itachi's back, Obito sneered coldly. Even if he was also an Uchiha, he didn't have a good impression of these so-called clansmen, and whether they lived or died had nothing to do with him. Suddenly, a strong fluctuation swept through his eyes, and the space in front of him suddenly became like a deep-sea whirlpool, sucking Obito's body into it. Glancing at Obito, who had disappeared, Dustless was about to leave, but suddenly there was a feeling of electric shock in his body. It's really ironic. It turns out that I still have a conscience. Looking at Itachi's receding figure, Dustless laughed bitterly under the mask, and suddenly there was a throbbing in his body that had never appeared before, and it stopped him from taking a step forward. Looking at Itachi's receding figure with a complicated expression, Dustless also turned into a streamer and rushed straight towards him. In the dark room, one couldn't even see their own fingers, and from time to time, there would be a cold wind blowing, adding a sense of horror to the atmosphere. Especially the cold light that passed by from time to time, it was especially gloomy and terrifying, and the soul would tremble incomparably. Creak! The classic Japanese-style sliding door was gently pulled open, revealing a vague and deep outline. The tachi in his hand was stained with blood, reflecting the calm and emotionless face. It was Uchiha Itachi. "You're here, Itachi. It seems that you've chosen to join their side." Fugaku sat quietly, looking at the bloody tachi in Itachi's hand. He smiled with relief, giving people the feeling that he had seen through life and death. His tone showed that he no longer cared about the world. Hearing this, Itachi just stared at Fugaku in silence. He lowered his head, and his eyes flashed with a complicated light. His eyes moved slightly and fell on Makoto. "Skunk, you're a good boy." Seeing Itachi looking at her, Makoto smiled gently. Her gentle smile gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. Clang! Itachi's body suddenly trembled, and the blood-stained sword in his hand fell to the ground uncontrollably. Itachi's teary eyes were reflected on the cold sword. All kinds of emotions poured into his heart, and the tears in Itachi's eyes burst out uncontrollably. This was the only time in his life that he shed tears. "It's not your fault. Maybe this is redemption in disguise." Seeing the blood-stained tachi fall to the ground, Fugaku's expression became more complicated, and then he closed his eyes with guilt. It was because of him that the Uchiha clan ended up in this situation today, which made Itachi live a miserable life in the middle of a wall. "It's all my fault. I'm not a qualified father." Uchiha Fugaku's face was full of self-blame and regret. If he hadn't coveted the position of Hokage too much, he wouldn't have been blinded by greed. Perhaps he wouldn't have led to today's tragedy, and Uchiha Itachi wouldn't have led to such a miserable life. Dustless was like this, and so was Itachi. Suddenly looking back, Fugaku suddenly felt that he was living in a world of genjutsu. He was alone and had no goals. His two sons also left him because of his mistakes. "I worked hard all my life, but in exchange for such an ending, sad and ridiculous." At this point, Uchiha Fugaku finally realized that he had been living like a puppet in the shadow of power all his life, just like a walking corpse. "Do it, Itachi. If you don't do it, the guys in Konoha won't let you go," Fugaku said in a deep voice. Staring at Itachi's handsome face, a proud smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "You are the biggest pride of my life, and the stupidest thing I did in my life was to drive away Dustless." After that, he closed his eyes in despair. Fugaku was silent. Looking at his life, the stupidest thing he did was to drive his son Dustless out of the family. "Itachi, you must take good care of Sasuke. He's still young, only a few years old this year. It's a pity that his birthday is coming. Please say sorry to him for me and Fugaku." Makoto said softly. She always had a kind smile on her face. She was very quiet, and no matter when, she was so kind and kind. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it. Dustless, who was secretly observing, took off his mask, revealing his handsome face. He stared at Makoto's gentle eyes, and his deep black eyes flashed with sadness. Once upon a time, Uchiha Makoto also looked at Dustless with such eyes, but looking at the current state of Fugaku and Uchiha Makoto, she didn't know why she couldn't bring up the slightest bit of hatred. Chapter 167. Staring at the faces of Uchiha Makoto and Fugaku, Dust's hatred suddenly disappeared, especially towards Uchiha Makoto. From the beginning to the end, he didn't have much hatred towards her. "Do it, Itachi." At this moment, Uchiha Fugaku's voice sounded, and his tone was extremely firm. Even Dustless, who was secretly observing, frowned. He didn't expect this old man to be so unafraid of death. Immediately looking up, Dustless could clearly see that Itachi once again picked up the tachi that fell on the ground and walked towards the Uchiha couple. Pucci, in the dark room, a cold light flashed in midair, and suddenly two beautiful and narrow snowflakes appeared. Dustless, who had excellent vision, saw the Uchiha Fugaku couple fall to the ground one after another and die on the spot. Goodbye. After looking at the Uchiha couple expressionlessly for a while, Itachi's pupils were as calm as stagnant water. There was no emotion, not even the slightest. After a few moments of sluggishness, Itachi turned around and left, quickly disappearing into the dark space. At the same time, Dustless also came out of the dark space. His deep black eyes swept over the two bodies. Dustless was silent for a moment, and after a while, he was about to leave, but his feet seemed to be tightly bound by thousands of pounds of meteorite iron, and he couldn't move. Things are really unpredictable. I didn't expect that I would have the opportunity to use that jutsu, and on the person I hate the most. With his self-deprecating smile, Dustless shook his head helplessly. His left eye suddenly changed and twisted, and the purple Rinnegan suddenly appeared, with 9 mysterious black tomo hanging on the black coil. Dustless's momentum rose sharply, and with one handprint, he looked at the dead Uchiha couple. His eyes suddenly solidified, and the Rinnegan rippled. Outer Path, Rinnegan Tensei Jutsu. Uchiha Makoto and Uchiha Fugaku's bodies emitted an emerald-green brilliance, stopping above the two, and then slowly drilling into their bodies. Looking around, the sword wounds on Fugaku and Makoto's bodies began to heal quickly, leaving no trace behind. Even the wounds on their bodies were healed, and the wounds were healed, leaving no trace behind. Rinnegan Tensei Jutsu is one of the most powerful forbidden jutsu of the Rinnegan, and it is also the most powerful resurrection jutsu so far. Using this jutsu is extremely risky. Not only does it consume a large amount of chakra, but it also puts a user's life at risk. The death rate is extremely high. Of course, all of this was just a small matter for Dustless. Strange. Wasn't I dead? Fugaku, who was in front of him, felt extremely strange, but at the same time, he couldn't help but frown. The person in front of him gave him a feeling he was and felt. As he felt he was blood's, he felt's blood. You are. Makoto, you're awake. Just as Kuroto was about to ask who Dustless was, Uchiha Makoto woke up and looked at the dark environment in a daze, as if she thought she was in hell. Fugaku. This is, after waking up, Uchiha Makoto looked at the strange yet familiar world around her. She naively thought that this was the underworld, but after looking around carefully, she realized that this was obviously her home. Her beautiful eyes fell on Dustless, and she felt a sense of kinship. The person in front of her was undoubtedly much older than Itachi. Are you Dustless? It is worth mentioning that the one who spoke first was Fugaku, the one who didn't get along with Dustless the most. He looked at Dustless in disbelief, although his tone was hesitant, but his heart was indescribably sure. This place is no longer suitable for you. Leave Konoha as soon as possible. The Uchiha has become a thing of the past. Dustless's voice gushed out of his throat. His tone was unusually indifferent. It was like he was cut off from the world and seemed to be incompatible with the world in front of him. All in all, it was an indescribable indifference. Makoto shed tears of joy. If there was a knot in her heart that couldn't be untied, it was undoubtedly Dustless. I'm sorry. I know these words may be insignificant to you, and it won't make you forgive my mistakes, but it is absolutely sincere. Fugaku's throat rolled, and he choked. His tone was sincere, and his eyes were clear. It was clear that he was serious. 10,000 beasts rise and fall because of fate. My hatred for you is gone with the wind. The reason why I resurrected you is nothing more than to have a clear conscience. You don't have to worry, and you don't have to thank me. Slightly turning his left face, the incomparably clear Rinnegan Sharingan was exposed in front of Fugaku's eyes. Unlike before, after experiencing life and death, Fugaku seemed to understand the most precious thing in life. Although he was surprised by the purple eyes he had never seen before, he didn't show any greed. It seems that he finally understood something. Fugaku's eyes didn't show any greed towards the Rinnegan. Dustless nodded slightly in his heart, reluctantly acknowledging Fugaku. At the same time, his body began to blur, faintly losing its texture. Don't go. Seeing Dustless's body showing signs of collapsing, Makoto hurriedly turned around, but found that Dustless at this moment was like air, invisible. Even if his figure hadn't completely disappeared, she couldn't catch him. It gave people the feeling that they were in another dimension. Dustless faintly looked at Makoto's face, some ripples passed through his eyes, and then very indifferently said, "In the future, I will find a place to live in seclusion. Perhaps this will be the last time we meet." He took a deep look at Mikoto and Fugaku, and then his body split apart and turned into thousands of golden rays that gradually disappeared. In the empty room, only Fugaku and his wife were left. Chapter 168. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku looked at each other and saw the bitterness in each other's eyes. "It seems that he still can't let go of my past mistakes." Fugaku smiled bitterly, but at the same time, he didn't forget to look at Mikoto. Seeing the tears in her eyes, he couldn't help but secretly blame himself and bowed his head in silence. "I never prayed for him to forgive me." After a long silence, Fugaku sighed and then said heavily, "Mikoto, let's leave Konoha temporarily. There is no Uchiha clan here." "But Sasuke is still in Konoha." Mikoto wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. No matter what happened, she loved her child deeply and regarded him as more precious than her own life. "Let's leave Sasuke in Konoha." After thinking for a long time, Fugaku said, "Although it's cruel to Sasuke, he's also living a life of desperation with us. It's safer to stay in Konoha. With Itachi's style of doing things, I think he should have reached an agreement with Konoha and won't hurt Sasuke." However, on the other side, another scene played out. The young Uchiha Sasuke looked at the Uchiha station with horror. Feeling the thick smell of blood in the air, he was so scared that he stepped back again and again with a face full of fear. Especially when he inhaled the air with his nostrils, it was filled with the disgusting smell of blood. This must be an illusion. Boom! Perhaps because of excessive fear, Sasuke didn't realize that there was a stone behind him. He suddenly tripped and fell to the ground. Looking around at the Uchiha's residence, he couldn't accept it for a while. "My stupid brother," a ghostly, psychedelic voice was heard. Then, a black shadow came into view. The deep A mark on his face was clearly visible, and his whole body exuded an aura of isolation from the world. It was Uchiha Itachi. "Brother Itachi." The young Uchiha Sasuke wept with joy. He quickly wiped his tears with his broken arm and ran towards Uchiha Itachi in a panic, like a little chick falling into the water, with a look of surprise on his face. However, a cold light flashed in Itachi's eyes. Bang! With a sweep of his leg, Uchiha Sasuke, who was jumping happily, was kicked away. The young Sasuke instantly flew backward for more than 10 meters, pulling out an obvious ditch on the ground. Pooh! Sasuke's blood was boiling, and the bones and organs in his body seemed to be dislocated, directly causing him to vomit blood, and his face was pale. His body hurt, but his heart hurt even more. "Brother Itachi, do you still not understand? My foolish little brother, everything that's happening before your eyes is because of me." Itachi's cold words combined with his cold eyes at this moment, Itachi was like a beast breaking out of its cage, biting whoever it caught, giving people a very awe-inspiring feeling. The young Uchiha Sasuke stared blankly at the murderous Uchiha Itachi. For a moment, he forgot all the pain in his body and couldn't feel the slightest pain. There's nothing to be surprised about. Today, you're the only Uchiha. Seeing that Sasuke was scared, Itachi's cold voice was filled with killing intent. The surrounding temperature was forced to drop by dozens of degrees in an instant, pulling the former's thoughts back. "Impossible. You must be a fake." Uchiha Sasuke's whole body shivered, and he looked at Uchiha Itachi with hatred. At such a young age, his eyes were as sharp as a beast's. Coupled with his ferocious little face, his appearance was barely good. It seemed that Itachi was his biggest reverse scale, and he couldn't allow others to tarnish it. "It's a good look. Finally, what a ninja should look like." A slight ripple appeared in Itachi's dead eyes, and he nodded without a trace. However, his brother's optimistic attitude must be taught a lesson. It's not just them. Itachi's eyes looked around, and his emotionless pupils were filled with indifference and disdain for human life. He was very different from the gentle and kind Uchiha Itachi. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's a fake. Even our parents, speaking of this, Uchiha Itachi's tone changed, and then he looked at Uchiha Sasuke's hostile face. His eyes suddenly turned red, and 3 dark red tomo formed a big pinwheel. Since you don't believe me, then I'll let you relive the scene of your parents being killed, and you standing aside indifferently. Tsukuyami. As soon as Itachi's voice fell, the world in Sasuke's line of sight also turned upside down. The dark night sky turned crimson, as if it represented Itachi's desperate and dead heart, without any color or sentiment. A huge image suddenly appeared in front of Uchiha Sasuke. It was the scene of Uchiha Itachi killing Uchiha Fugaku and his wife. Through the image in Tsukuyami's world, Sasuke looked at his parents lying in a pool of blood. Perhaps because of too much grief, Sasuke didn't realize that a special chakra popped up in his mind, slightly stimulating Sasuke's eyes. Have you opened your eyes? Single Tomo Sharingan. Itachi smiled faintly, and at the same time, he stared at Sasuke and said coldly, "It's just a single Tomo Sharingan. It's not worth killing. It seems that I seem to have overestimated you. It's really disappointing. Killing you is tasteless." Looking at the single Tomo in Sasuke's eye socket, Itachi's scarlet eyes turned, revealing a deep big pinwheel, Mangekyo Sharingan. My foolish little brother, if you want to kill me, then hate me, detest me, then live an ugly life, keep escaping, live an ignoble life. Then, when you have the same eyes as mine, come to me. Chapter 169. Uchiha Itachi looked indifferently at Sasuke's ferocious little face, taking in the hatred on his cheeks. At the same time, sadness flashed in the depths of his eyes. Although this method was a bit cruel, it was the most effective and direct way. I'll kill you. Uchiha Sasuke jumped up, and his sharp kunai pierced towards Itachi's face. The killing intent in his eyes was as ferocious as a beast's. It seems that betrayal by his closest people has seriously distorted Uchiha Sasuke's physical and mental health. Fragile. Avoiding the oncoming cold light, Uchiha Itachi grabbed Uchiha Sasuke by force and pressed him to the ground like a rabbit, his face full of contempt. The gap is too big. Now you really don't make me interested in killing you, Sasuke. Uchiha Itachi stepped on Uchiha Sasuke's head expressionlessly, and his breath was restrained. Killing Uchiha Sasuke was just a trivial matter for him. In the Naka Shrine of the Uchiha clan, there is a stone tablet that records the history of the Uchiha clan and also records the truth about the Sharingan. Itachi looked at Uchiha Sasuke under his feet and wiped out all the humanity in his heart, trying to maintain the coldness he had never had before. The way to open Mangekyo Sharingan is to kill your own family, and I killed my parents with my own hands, so I got the power beyond Magatama Sharingan. Itachi said incomparably coldly. The coldness floating out of his body was like thousands of years of ice. His tone was extremely serious, full of indifference to the so-called feelings. Especially when he said that he killed his parents, it seemed that he was talking about the most ridiculous thing, and he directly snorted and showed disdain. This made Uchiha Sasuke look at his strange brother, who usually respected his parents the most, in disbelief. Live on while you're at death's door. For now, I'll temporarily keep you in a cage. When the day comes that you can open the same eyes as mine, I'll kill you. Without looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Itachi passed by him directly. As for Uchiha Sasuke under his feet, he treated him as air, as if he was nothing, like a breeze. Itachi frowned slightly and immediately turned around, revealing half of his indifferent face, and said, "My stupid brother, by the way, let me tell you something. Uchiha Dustless, our big brother, he seems to be alive." Thinking back, Itachi suddenly remembered everything that the Sandaime said. Although it was just a personal guess, there was always some kind of inexplicable feeling in his heart that was pulling him. Impossible! He died many years ago. Uchiha Sasuke roared hysterically at Uchiha Itachi, denying everything about Uchiha Itachi, trying to deny this man's whole life. "Goodbye, my stupid brother. After saying that, without waiting for Uchiha Sasuke to react, Itachi disappeared without a trace. The boundless night sky was particularly bleak. In the vast Uchiha base, only Uchiha Sasuke was left, accompanied by the black night sky and scattered corpses behind him. During this period, Dustless came back again. In order to better fool Uchiha Sasuke, he made 2 similar corpses to confuse the kid, and it was inevitable that he would notice something. Early the next morning, the news of the Uchiha's annihilation quickly raged through Konoha like a hurricane, and even the whole world. The top clan for hundreds of years was massacred. Like a magnitude 10 earthquake, the whole world trembled. The Uchiha, who used to dominate the world for hundreds of years, was wiped out in a snap of the fingers. No one could remain calm. After all, there were too many unprecedented figures in this super clan. Uchiha Madara was invincible in the world, and then there was Uchiha Dustless. The prestige of the Uchiha was raised to an unprecedented peak period. Now that the entire clan was suddenly destroyed, no one was surprised that it was fake. The major ninja villages sent a large number of spies to Konoha's ninja village to spy on the secrets. However, Konoha didn't disappoint these people. On the same day, they announced that the culprit of the Uchiha's annihilation was Uchiha Itachi, the second son of Uchiha Fugaku. In other words, he was the main culprit who destroyed the Sand Village in the past, the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless. It has to be said that Konoha was particularly sensitive when it came to the Uchiha. The first thing they did was to announce that Uchiha Itachi was an S-class defector and issued a wanted order to all the ninjas of various countries. They poured all the dirty water on Itachi, making him a scapegoat, while they stayed out of the matter. It can be said that Konoha played the realm of shamelessness incisively and vividly. In the empty godly house, there were few people, and only a few people of different stature were standing side by side. These unknown, mysterious people were all wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds, and their aura was cold, giving a very gloomy and oppressive feeling. These people were obviously led by the middle-aged man with orange hair in the middle, and they could clearly see that there were a lot of cold black iron rods inserted in his head. This group of people was, without a doubt, the members of the Akatsuki and their leader, Pain Tendo. However, Uzumaki Nagato, who controlled Yahiko, became a lot smarter, and he knew that many people were interested in the Rinnegan. He didn't wear the Rinnegan like before, and his pupils looked like normal human eyes. Standing next to Yahiko was Kisame Kisame, who was carrying a big sword full of fangs, Sasori, and Orochimaru. Obviously, in the past few years, Yahiko had collected a lot of strong people, and they weren't talkative people. They didn't talk to each other, and they didn't talk to each other. The new member is here. The leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, suddenly opened his eyes, and as his voice fell, Uchiha Itachi came into everyone's sight. Chapter 170. Itachi's weak and small figure came into view, as weak as a willow branch. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and Itachi's clothes fluttered in the wind. Especially his sickly pale face, he gave people a feeling of extreme fragility, like a patient who had just recovered from serious illness, so weak that he couldn't even stand the wind. Seeing this scene, the members of the Akatsuki frowned slightly, including Tendo Pain, and couldn't help but doubt Itachi's strength. The Akatsuki was full of strong people, and all of them were S-class ninjas. Their strength was self-evident. Even if they weren't as strong as the Kages of the other villages, they were almost the same. Placing a sick person in the Akatsuki made everyone question Yahiko's approach. For those who truly knew Itachi, such as Orochimaru, his eyes lit up as he looked at Itachi. He naturally knew that Itachi was the culprit behind the destruction of the Uchiha clan. Moreover, before he defected, Itachi was a genius of the Uchiha clan with the same name as Shursui. There was another important factor that Orochimaru cared about the most. Itachi was the younger brother of Uchiha Dustless. He once teamed up with Dustless to fight against the Rock Village. Naturally, He knew better than anyone how strong Dustless was. At the same time, there were two people who had complicated thoughts. Naturally, it was Yahiko and Kisame, who was defeated by Dustless in the past. Both of them were defeated by Dustless. It was inevitable that they had a special impression of Itachi. Uchiha Dustless's younger brother. He shouldn't be weak. Yahiko took a deep breath and calmed down his complicated emotions. As a defeated opponent of White Dust, he naturally knew how terrifying White Dust could be compared to Kisame, who was defeated in an instant. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Itachi walked straight in, but strangely, the cold wind from before chose to avoid him. Whenever it came in contact with Itachi's hurricane, it would take a detour. Uchiha, Itachi, welcome to the Akatsuki. As the leader of the Akatsuki, Pain naturally took a step forward and welcomed Itachi. However, at any time, any place, any event, there would always be some unexpected characters who would jump out and do unexpected things. Hey, is this guy really suitable to join Akatsuki? Look at his weak and bony appearance. This uncle is very doubtful. Am I right, Kakuzu? An ear-piercing and heroic voice rang out. Raising their heads, they saw a man holding a red 3-section scythe. His face was filled with arrogance as he walked out of the shadows. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he was an extremely arrogant person. It was Fei Duan from the Akatsuki organization. He wore a ring with the word 3 on his finger. Kakuzu's green eyes first fell on Uchiha Itachi. Looking at the expressionless Itachi, his eyes flashed with surprise and then glanced at Haiden. It has nothing to do with me. If you have any questions, solve them yourself. Ignoring the crazy Haiden, Kakuzu retracted his gaze and put on a look of indifference. His green eyes were vaguely playful. Obviously, he saw Itachi's true strength. This is definitely an unparalleled strong man. It's Haiden. Tendo Pain turned around and looked at Haiden gloomily. His eyes were filled with haze. Just as he was about to scold Haiden not to ask for trouble, Uchiha Itachi's voice sounded. Do you want to try? Itachi's dark and deep eyes fell on the arrogant Haiden. He frowned slightly, and his eyes flashed with indifference. Itachi said, the gap between us is too big. Judging from your weapon, you should be a strength-type ninja. That's not bad. However, we are not in the same dimension. Staring at the 3-section scythe on Haiden's shoulder, Itachi said softly with some persuasion. He was good at Jinjutsu, and Haiden was good at Taijutsu. This type of ninja is generally very poor in defense of Jinjutsu. In that case, let me show you the power of Master Haiden. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and Haiden took the scythe off his shoulder. The weapon that weighed thousands of pounds was like a toy in his hand. It was dazzling to play with, and he seemed to be extremely skilled. Sure enough, it's an unusual organization. There are all kinds of people. No wonder Sandaime Hokage said that the people who attacked Konoha a few years ago may be related to people in this organization. Itachi's eyes swept over several people in the Akatsuki organization. Especially when he saw Orochimaru, his heart fell to the bottom. Even Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, can join the Akatsuki organization. It can also be seen that the Akatsuki is extraordinary. What Itachi cared about most was that the so-called leader was inserted with black iron rods all over his body. He was cold all over, and there was no sign of life. Obviously, he was like a puppet. Let me teach you a lesson on behalf of the leader and let you know what it means to respect the old and love the young. A newcomer should know the rules that newcomers should know. With a ferocious face, Haiden rushed over, but his speed was still very slow, at least in Itachi's eyes. At the moment, his dark eyes just stared at Haiden without fear. The deep 3 tomo were like blood-red gems inlaid in his pupils, flashing with a strange luster. What a powerful eye power, worthy of being Dustless's younger brother. Orochimaru looked at Itachi's pupils with blazing eyes, and his heart was burning with excitement. Especially at the moment when the 3 tomo flashed, his heart was in his throat, and he almost danced with joy. The covetousness and eagerness in his eyes were undisguised. It was precisely because he had seen the power of Dustless's Sharingan that Orochimaru would be so persistent in his pursuit of a Sharingan. Damn, what's going on? Haiden's angry voice exploded, and his eyes swept over. Itachi's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and his body couldn't move. It seemed that he was forcibly imprisoned. His eyes were full of dark red flames, and his 3 Tomo Sharingan was staring. Chapter 171. Haiden's abnormality naturally fell into everyone's eyes. Immediately, the line of sight of everyone in Akatsuki organization was drawn over. Looking at Haiden, who was unable to budge, his 4 limbs seemed to be fixed. They frowned one after another, and some of them even frowned. This Uchiha Itachi's Genjutsu attainment is really terrifying. He just glanced at Haiden and made him unable to move. What a terrifying man. He deserves to be the younger brother of Uchiha Wuchen. Sure enough, he's not an ordinary person. Tendo Pain looked at Uchiha Itachi in surprise, and then looked at Haiden, who couldn't move even after using all his strength. He couldn't help but nod secretly, and was very satisfied with Uchiha Itachi's performance. As for the trapped Haiden, he can only blame himself for being the first bird. I must get the Sharingan. Compared with the other members of the organization who were simply surprised, Orochimaru's heart was as clear as a mirror. He was much clearer that this was just a 3 Tomo Sharingan, and he needed a higher level of Manjikyu Sharingan. Since he defected from Konoha, due to the fact that he teamed up with Dustless during the period, he was influenced by Dustless's dojutsu. He has always been eager to get the Sharingan of Uchiha, even to a state of madness. He would do anything for the Sharingan, especially since Uchiha Itachi was the younger brother of the former Uchiha Dustless. This identity attracted Orochimaru's attention even more. This is a good opportunity. Orochimaru's eyes scattered quietly. Seeing that everyone was still immersed in the strangeness of the Sharingan, Orochimaru laughed secretly. Of course, he wouldn't choose to attack Uchiha Itachi now, because all the members of the Akatsuki were here. I'm afraid that only a top powerhouse like the first Hokage could leave safely under the siege of the Akatsuki. Orochimaru still understood this point. Let me go if you have the guts, and let Uncle Haiden teach you how to be a man. Flying Duan, who had been trying to break free from the illusion for a long time without success, had a livid expression on his face. It was as ugly as a black pot that had been burning for thousands of years. Coupled with his fiendish appearance and the crimson 3-part scythe in his hand, he gave off the feeling of a grim reaper on earth. Looking at Itachi's calm face, Haiden's eyes were twitching, and he immediately looked at Kakuzu, who had a playful smile on his face, and he was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Why aren't you coming over to help? We're on the same team. We're bound together for good or ill. If I lose, you'll lose face too. Haiden shouted at Kakuzu, and, at the same time, he couldn't help cursing Kakuzu in his heart. They were teammates. They should help each other instead of watching. Hearing this, Kakuzu looked hesitant. Although he was quite afraid of Itachi, but with Haiden, even if they can't defeat him, they can still deal with him. Especially as Haiden said, they are on the same team. If Haiden is unlucky, then Kakuzu won't have a good ending, and Haiden is usually quite good, although his behavior is a bit unreliable, but at the critical moment he can be trusted. Stop, Itachi. Seeing that Kakuzu wanted to help, Yahiko slightly frowned, waved his hand, and said with a firm tone. At the same time, there was a hint of warning in his voice. Whether it is Uchiha Itachi, Kakuzu, or Haiden, if they dare to challenge his authority, they will definitely not have a good ending. Got it. Uchiha Itachi nodded. Then he removed the Genjutsu binding Haiden and stood in the same place without any expression, carefully looking at the members of Akatsuki. His task is to investigate the Akatsuki, and at the same time, to find out whether the masked man who attacked Konoha was the one who controlled the Akatsuki. At least you know what's good for you. If there's a next time, Master Fei Duan will definitely not forgive you." Hearing Yahiko's words, Haydn could only snort and glare fiercely at Itachi. His mood was particularly gloomy. Not only did he not find any sense of superiority, but he was also humiliated by Itachi. Although he couldn't wait to beat Itachi, Haydn didn't dare to disobey Yahiko's order. As Conan said before, Yahiko has the absolute right to speak in the Akatsuki, and his order is equivalent to the command of God. "Welcome to the Akatsuki, Itachi. Your codename is Suzaku, and this is your clothes and ring." After throwing the black uniform and the ring with the word Suzaku to Itachi, Yahiko looked around and said with a long tone, "The people in the organization have been gathered, and from now on, Itachi and Kisame will perform the task together." Kisame stared at Itachi, and to be honest, he really felt that it was ridiculous to team up with Dustless's younger brother. He even felt that he was dreaming a very unrealistic dream. After all, Dustless defeated him in May. If Dustless didn't deliberately let them go, it's likely that they would have died many years ago, not to mention teaming up with Uchiha Itachi. "From now on, we will be a team." Kisame walked to Itachi's side. He was much stronger than Itachi, and the height of the two soon formed a contrast, and Itachi didn't look worth mentioning. "I hope we can get along well in the future." Looking at Itachi, who was shorter than him and much thinner, Kisame said seriously and showed a kind smile. Although it looked strange with his shark face, it was sincere. At that time, Uchiha Wuchen didn't look as tall as Itachi, but he crushed him with his godlike strength. It was like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. "I hope so too." Hearing this, Itachi nodded. He could feel that Kisame's words were from the bottom of his heart, and there was no falsehood in his words. He also felt that Kisame gave him a good feeling. For a moment, the two felt a sense of appreciation for each other. Chapter 172. Looking up at Itachi and Kisame, Nagato, who was secretly controlling Yahiko, was relieved. He nodded with satisfaction, and his eyes flashed with a burning luster. In this way, the Akatsuki's list given by Dustless was finally complete. "Huh, is it my illusion? Strange." Yahiko, who was meditating, suddenly raised his head and looked at the distant sky. He couldn't help but frown as he felt that he was being watched. "Maybe it's my fault." After carefully perceiving, Yahiko didn't find anything strange. He thought that maybe his nerves were too sensitive, and he didn't think that anyone in the world could escape his perception. "I haven't seen you for a few years, and I didn't expect Uzumaki Nagato's strength to skyrocket." A frivolous and slightly surprised voice sounded. The person who was watching was actually Dustless. He didn't expect Uzumaki Nagato's strength to improve so fast that he could even detect his presence. It seems that Yahiko's death hit him a lot, and this hatred turned into a motivation to practice. But this is good. Staring at the vague figure in the distance, Dustless said with a relieved smile, and then looked at Kisame, who quickly got along with Uchiha Itachi, and couldn't help but shake his head. To some extent, these two people are really in tune, and can be regarded as an absolute combination of wisdom and courage. Dustless-sama. The ground at Dustless's feet suddenly exploded, and a Nepenthes came out of it. Staring at Dustless with a teasing smile on his face, White Zetsu said, "It seems that the chess pieces are all gathered, Zetsu. But before that, let's watch a good show." Looking at the members of the Akatsuki, Dustless's eyes fell on Orochimaru as he said, "Itachi, I have some private matters to discuss with you." Orochimaru tried his best to remain calm and said to Itachi in a kind tone. Even if it sounded strange, Orochimaru said that he had done his best. However, the more Orochimaru was like this, the more Itachi felt that he was plotting something. "Orochimaru, a snake doesn't live with an ant. You should understand such a simple truth." Kisame directly interrupted, not giving any face to Orochimaru, this senior, at all. Everyone in Akatsuki organization was proud and arrogant, and this was a place where strength was the most important thing. There was no such thing as seniority. And Kisame didn't think that he was worse than Orochimaru. After all, he was the one who saved his life from Dustless, even if the other side completely let him win. What did you say? When Orochimaru heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched fiercely, and the smile he squeezed out suddenly froze. His expression changed constantly, and he looked at Brother Shark with an unkind expression. He didn't expect this kid to say this. Isn't this saying that Orochimaru's name? It was equivalent to slapping him in the face, and it was the loudest kind of slap. Orochimaru. Uchiha Itachi turned his head casually, raised his eyelids, and looked at Orochimaru faintly, then turned his head, without looking at Orochimaru, and said calmly, "I have nothing to say to you. Is that so? That's a pity." Hearing this, Orochimaru didn't get angry but laughed instead. The corners of his mouth curled up into a scary smile, and his snake eyes flickered with a sly light. He pretended to sigh and said with pity, "I thought you would be interested in that man, but now it seems that I thought too much." After saying that, Orochimaru turned around and left without stopping at all. His back was exceptionally free and straightforward. "Although I don't know what you're planning, it doesn't matter if I go with you. I also have something to ask you." Itachi's eyes fell on Orochimaru, and he followed him indifferently. He knew that Orochimaru must be planning something, but he also had something to ask Orochimaru. "Itachi, I'm afraid that Orochimaru is after your Sharingan." Watching Itachi leave with Orochimaru, Kisame whispered to Itachi and rationally analyzed, "I was lucky to see him in the Third War. That guy has always been obsessed with Uchiha Dustless. I guess he wants you because of your identity as Uchiha Dustless's younger brother, and of course, your Sharingan." Looking at Orochimaru's back with disdain, Kisame continued, "I advise you not to go. Orochimaru is ambitious, and he joined the Akatsuki for that. It doesn't matter, Kisame." Uchiha Itachi chuckled and stared at Kisame. His eyes flashed with a strange light, and he looked at him with admiration. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. This man who gave people the first impression of a rough man was, in fact, a man with a meticulous mind. What Kisame said was naturally the Rinnegan, because Orochimaru coveted the Rinnegan. So he attacked Yahiko, but he wasn't Yahiko's opponent and was defeated by him, so he joined the Akatsuki. As the saying goes, it's hard to change one's nature. Orochimaru was a man who pursued strength and the Rinnegan. The sudden appearance of Uchiha Itachi gave Orochimaru a new prey. "Don't worry about Kisame. He doesn't have the ability to take me down." A warm current flowed through Itachi's cold heart, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He knew that Gunpei Kisame was thinking for him, but he was also confident that not only was he not Orochimaru's prey, but Orochimaru was his prey. Itachi's pupils were cold, and he decisively followed. He knew that Orochimaru was after him, but if he could drive Orochimaru out of the Akatsuki and let him lose the invisible umbrella of the Akatsuki, it's not a bad thing for Konoha's ninja village. At least, without the protection of the Akatsuki, Orochimaru would never be as ostentatious as he was now, and at least he would stay hidden and consolidate his power in the future. Chapter 173. On the ancient steps, Uchiha Itachi walked alone with a calm expression. Behind him was Orochimaru, whose face was pale and whose eyes were shining from time to time. "Uchiha Itachi, no matter what it takes, I will get your Sharingan in your body." Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slightly, secretly looking at Itachi's body. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was, and his heart was uncontrollable. Orochimaru seemed to be blinded by lard and lost his mind. A thick and long python drilled out of his left arm uncontrollably, spitting out scarlet tongue. The scarlet bloody mouth was wide open at Itachi, and a subtle hissing sound could be heard. Obviously, Orochimaru was impatient. Whoosh! In the end, Orochimaru couldn't suppress his greed. His eyes flashed with a touch of ruthlessness, and the giant earth-colored snake on his left arm went straight to Itachi's waist. An unprecedented force wrapped around Uchiha Itachi tightly. It wrapped around him for more than a dozen times before it stopped. It looked at Itachi with a ferocious expression, hissing and spitting out its long tongue. It circled around Itachi, which was particularly scary and gloomy. However, Itachi didn't turn his head from beginning to end. Orochimaru was behind him as if he was invisible. Can you answer my question now? Orochimaru, looking at the blue sky in front of him, Itachi said calmly. He already knew that Orochimaru didn't have good intentions. The only thing he didn't expect was that Orochimaru would be so anxious. Although it was somewhat unexpected, it was also within Itachi's expectations. Answer your question? Is your brain not enough? You are my prey now, and you have been successfully caught. Do you think I need to answer your so-called question? In this world, the strong have the final say. Orochimaru sneered at Itachi, who was bound by the snake in front of him. His pale face showed disdain and contempt. Itachi had been successfully caught by him, and the so-called question didn't exist. It was his freedom to answer it or not. In other words, suddenly turned his head, revealing half of his face. Looking at the proud Orochimaru, Itachi said coldly, "As long as I defeat you, I can answer my question. It's too easy." After that, Itachi's eyes suddenly turned scarlet, staring at the sky in front of him, and strong, evil fluctuations surged out of his eyes. Too easy? Orochimaru's face suddenly collapsed. Not to mention that he had already subdued Itachi. He was also one of the former Sannin. Now that Itachi said that it was too easy to defeat him, how could he be calm? He couldn't help but want to teach Itachi a lesson. This is Orochimaru, who was about to teach Uchiha Itachi a lesson, suddenly found that he couldn't move at all. His body seemed to be forced into a chisel, and he couldn't move at all. Just like the previous Haiden, Orochimaru couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Golden Bind Jinjutsu. Damn it! Looking at Itachi with a pale face, Orochimaru cursed in his heart. He was particularly depressed. He had warned himself to pay attention to Itachi's Jinjutsu, but he didn't expect that he would still fall for it unknowingly. If it wasn't for Itachi, he wouldn't even be aware of it. This shows how terrible Itachi's Jinjutsu is. Under these eyes, any jutsu you use will be seen through. The serpent binding Itachi's body also disappeared. Itachi turned around and stared at Orochimaru, who was sweating in cold sweat, and said in a casual tone, as if what he did was not worth mentioning. "So that's how it is, worthy of being dustless, Kuin's younger brother. I really can't underestimate him." Orochimaru tried his best to control the hand seals, and when he was about to launch a ninjutsu to break the binding of the Jinjutsu, a cold light suddenly appeared in front of him. Pucci! Orochimaru's left arm was suddenly cut off like cutting vegetables, and dark red blood spurted out of the wound, just like Orochimaru's personality. "Tell me, what do you know about that man? You should have teamed up with him to deal with the ninjas of the Rock Village. You know a lot of secrets that people don't know. You'd better tell me everything, otherwise I don't mind making you confess everything in the world of the Manjikyu Sharingan." The Sharingan of 3 Tomo Sharingan was instantly formed, and the pitch-black windmill was clearly visible. The fluctuation of eye power was more than 10 times stronger than the previous 3 Tomo Sharingan. What a powerful eye power! Orochimaru's face changed slightly when he saw this, and he lowered his head and pondered. When he used Jinjutsu to bind him, Itachi's pupils were clearly 3 Tomo Sharingan, and now they have become Manjikyu Sharingan, which means that it will be more difficult to deal with than before. Tell me everything you know, or I don't mind letting you have a taste of Tsukuyami. Looking down at Orochimaru's eyes coldly, Itachi said coldly, and at the same time, a horrible murderous aura overflowed from his body and shrouded Orochimaru's body. The cold murderous aura stabbed Orochimaru like a blade, causing him to feel a tingling sensation on his skin. What a strong murderous aura. But do you think you can kill me like this? You're too naive. Anyway, I'm one of the 3 Sannin, Orochimaru, so don't get carried away, kid of the Uchiha clan. Orochimaru's pale and sweaty face suddenly became ferocious. his neck elongated like a rubber, and he bit towards Itachi in the distance like a vicious beast. The corner of his mouth revealed sharp fangs, and even the corner of his mouth overflowed with disgusting saliva. At this moment, Orochimaru looked like a giant snake, and he didn't look like a human. Compared with Uchiha Dustless, you're still too far away, kid. Chapter 174. Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan froze as he looked at the oncoming snake head indifferently. His face was expressionless as he cast a pitiful look at Orochimaru. Amaterasu. As Itachi's voice fell, a black flame suddenly appeared on Orochimaru's head. The inextinguishable ghost fire swallowed Orochimaru's entire head. It seemed that he would die without a doubt. Orochimaru should be dead now. Zetsu and Dustless stood side by side in the distance, especially when they saw the black flame on Orochimaru's head. White Zetsu's tone seemed to be filled with unprecedented joy, and he couldn't wait for Orochimaru to die early. It's reasonable for White Zetsu to think so. After all, Amaterasu is known as the strongest physical attack. Not everyone can use the Tensigen or Rinnegan to absorb Amaterasu like Dustless. For ordinary people, Amaterasu is a dead end. Not everyone can use Yin-Yang Release to nullify Amaterasu. At least Orochimaru can't. Orochimaru is not so fragile. If Amaterasu can kill him, maybe he would have died many years ago. How can Itachi kill him? Dustless shook his head and denied. Even if Orochimaru is not Itachi's opponent, if he was killed by Amaterasu, Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, would have died long ago. Kakaka. The black flame that swallowed Orochimaru's head suddenly made a crisp sound, and then the black flame fell, and Orochimaru's head was still intact. Is this molting? Looking at the intact Orochimaru, Itachi frowned slightly, and then looked at the ground swallowed by the black flame, and his eyes flashed with a touch of understanding. How can this be? White Zetsu was speechless. He didn't expect that Orochimaru could escape Amaterasu by molting. Even the silent black Zetsu looked at the black flame on the ground. Wuchen didn't care. He was extremely indifferent because Uchiha Sasuke used substitution jutsu to escape Uchiha Itachi's Amaterasu in the later stage. In fact, it was not much different from the way of molting in front of him. There's no reason why Orochimaru can't do it. Kusanagi sword. Orochimaru suddenly spat out a sharp tachi from his mouth, flashing with a scorching light. This tachi gave off a feeling of extreme sharpness, and even the light reflected from the tachi could pierce people's eyes. Stupid Orochimaru, I should have told you just now that under these eyes, any jutsu you use will be seen through. No matter what kind of jutsu you use, it won't work, even the most basic one. Itachi said faintly. He didn't hide. He didn't, he's, and let's head swords. Clang. Itachi, SSS body. His body's is left. Kuden's SSS, and that was SSS bodies, and raps, this is, Eraser retracted his head, and Orochimaru's pupils suddenly shrank as he stared at the crimson skeleton that he had never seen before. Feeling the fluctuations of the evil chakra on it, a sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. Looks like I won't be able to take over his entire body. Orochimaru's eyes flashed with sadness, and he sighed in disappointment. Soon after, he spread out his huge perception in all direction and perceived several figures rushing towards him. He knew that today he would have to stop here and leave Akatsuki for good. One day, I will have to take over your body. Orochimaru looked at Itachi reluctantly. Of course, most of his eyes were on Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan. If he wasn't forced by the situation, Orochimaru wouldn't mind fighting him to the death. However, Akatsuki's people had already noticed this and were rushing over from all directions. Bang! Just as Orochimaru's voice fell, his body suddenly emitted white smoke and disappeared without a trace. Obviously, he used extremely fast body flicker jutsu to slip away. After all, he couldn't fight against all the members of Akatsuki. Ah! Orochimaru betrayed us just like that. He really can't be trusted. Noticing that Orochimaru disappeared like a ghost, Dustless said with a smile. From his frivolous and playful tone, it was not difficult to know that he already expected Orochimaru to defect. Dustless was calm as usual. Orochimaru defected from Akatsuki at this time, and then Itachi, Kisame, and Sasori went to Rock Village to defeat Deidara and forced him to join Akatsuki. This guy seems to be able to predict everything. Black Zetsu's single eye secretly peeped at Dustless, thinking about his deeds. Not only now, but also in the past, he could always predict everything in advance. It was really strange. "What are you thinking, Black Zetsu?" Half of Black Jew's body suddenly stiffened. He raised his head and suddenly saw Wu Chun looking at him with a smile. Wu Chen's indifferent eyes saw through everything with endless ridicule, as if he could see through everything. Black Jew's body immediately broke out in cold sweat. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. Just now, it was as if thousands of years of secrets were peeped by Wu Chun. Orochimaru has defected. I am thinking about who is suitable to replace him. After a short period of absent-mindedness, Black Zetsu said calmly. After thousands of years of dormancy, experiencing countless ups and downs, Black Zetsu's heart has long been as tough as iron, and his pupils were abnormally calm. He said softly to Dustless. This old guy's reaction is quite fast. Dustless sneered again and again. His visual capture ability was extremely strong. Even the slightest flaw of Black Zetsu couldn't escape his eyes. Even if he concealed it very quickly, he still caught the flaw of Black Zetsu. Although for the current Dustless, killing Black Zetsu is almost as simple as eating and drinking water, but now is obviously not the best time. And even if he kills Black Zetsu, he needs to use Rinnegan or Tenseigan to extract his memory. Chapter 175. Orochimaru's defection is indeed troublesome. At present, the number of members of the Akatsuki has just been gathered. Now that Orochimaru suddenly left, the morale will inevitably be hit, which is tantamount to directly slapping Pain's face. The members of the Akatsuki quickly rushed over and saw the scene of the previous battle and the residual chakra energy fluctuations in the air. They all frowned slightly. Obviously, there was an unusually fierce battle before, and the missing Orochimaru should belong to the defeated party, especially the broken arm that was still bleeding on the ground. Obviously, it was Orochimaru's. Damn, Orochimaru. After listening to Uchiha Itachi's story, Pain's face was blue. The majestic, murderous aura was vast and infinite, like a hurricane. The cold air froze the surrounding flowers and trees. Looking at Orochimaru's broken arm, he raised his hand and shot out a fiery red light, turning it into ashes. Perceiving Pain's violent and restless momentum, the Akatsuki members' faces changed. This boss who rarely shows his strength is so fierce. Of course, it is not ruled out that Pain is deliberately showing off. What should we do with Orochimaru? He knows a lot of secrets in the organization. As Orochimaru's teammate, Sasori asked in a deep voice. He used to work with Orochimaru, so he knew Orochimaru's temperament very well. If he is left alone, it is definitely raising a tiger, and one day he will be caught in a cocoon. Kakuzu and I will kill him. I have long been unhappy with that disgusting snake. This kind of task is the most suitable for Master Haiden. Right, Kaku? Indeed. Looking at the excited Haiden beside him, Kakuzu nodded this time. For him, money is more important than anything. Orochimaru's head is worth a lot of money in the black market. Killing a defected ninja in the organization and making a lot of money by the way, Kakuzu has no reason to refuse this kind of thing. Don't worry about Orochimaru for the time being. He should know that disclosing the secrets of the organization to the world will lead to a miserable end. Orochimaru is a smart person. He won't do such a stupid thing. After pondering for a long time, Pain calmly analyzed. Orochimaru had already joined the Akatsuki for some time. If he didn't open his eyes and expose the secrets of the Akatsuki to the world, he believed that even if he didn't do it himself, the two masked men behind the scenes would talk to Orochimaru. The two masked men were undoubtedly Dustless and Obito. It seems that I have to find someone to replace Orochimaru. Yahiko looked around and felt a headache coming on. It's not easy to find a powerful S-class ninja without a fixed organization. After so many years, he only found a few in front of him, and they were all rebellious ninjas. Looks like I can only give him a headache. On second thought, Yahiko passed the ball to Uchiha Obito because Kisame, and Itachi were introduced into the Akatsuki through Uchiha Obito. This is interesting. Seeing that Akatsuki was paralyzed because of the lack of manpower, Dustless, who was quietly observing in the dark, suddenly smiled. A brand new plan suddenly emerged in his mind, and after a short calculation, he felt that it was feasible and could be considered a good plan. Dustless, Sama, means looking at Dustless in confusion. White Zetsu said in a daze. Dustless's thinking was too fast, and he couldn't keep up with the rhythm. You're the only one in the world who knows that the masked man is Dustless Uchiha. Even Obito doesn't know about this, but even if they don't know, I think they've already suspected me. Dustless said with a strange smile. I mean, even if Obito and Uzumaki Nagato didn't say anything, I'm afraid they've already suspected that I'm the masked man, including Uchiha Itachi. Dustless was open-minded about this. Uchiha Madara's Eye of the Moon plan was full of mistakes, let alone him. If it wasn't for Obito's help behind the scenes to perfect the plan, I'm afraid the so-called Eye of the Moon would have already collapsed. In other words, no plan designed by anyone is perfect, even gods are no exception. Even if Black Zetsu finally succeeded in resurrecting Kagaya, I'm afraid he didn't expect that Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke would seal Kagaya again. It's very likely that they may have guessed that the masked man is Dustless Sama. Black Zetsu nodded slowly. Uzumaki Nagato and Uchiha Obito were not easy to deal with, and Uzumaki Nagato and Uchiha Obito were very close in the past 2 years. Maybe the two have exchanged their opinions with each other. In that case, why don't I jump out directly? With a scornful smile on his face, Dustless said directly, no matter what, Sun Wukong will never jump out of Gautama Buddha's palm. This world can't jump out of the palm of Dustless's hand. Dustless, Sama, do you want to expose your identity? White Zetsu asked doubtfully. Looking at Dustless's appearance, he wanted to jump from behind the scenes to the front, which means that the previous plan may be completely aborted. I kind of understand Dustless, Sama's meaning. Black Zetsu was worthy of being an old fox who lived for thousands of years. After a moment of silence, he immediately understood Dustless's intention and nodded uncontrollably, thinking that it was feasible. Dustless's face was frozen, and his eyes were shining. Since Uchiha Obito, Uzumaki Nagato, and Uchiha Itachi have secretly guessed that he is the masked man, it's better to jump to the front and in front of them. Uchiha Kagami will replace the masked man and secretly control Uchiha Obito and the Akatsuki. From then on, the masked man will be Uchiha Kagami. The masked man will be replaced by Uchiha Kagami, and Uchiha Dustless will jump to the front and join the Akatsuki, completely clearing the suspicion that the masked man is Uchiha Dustless. Chapter 176. 3 days later, in the Rain Village, in the misty rain, in a dirty room, 2 isolated figures could be clearly seen. It was Pain and Uchiha Obito with a mask. This is really tricky. Damn Orochimaru. He should know what to do and what not to do. Obito whispered to himself with a little bit of killing intent. If Orochimaru really dared to reveal the purpose of the Akatsuki, he wouldn't mind personally destroying his nest. Let's find a new member first. Orochimaru's matter can be temporarily put aside. Obito pondered and sighed silently. He couldn't think of a suitable person to replace Orochimaru. It's better to look for him. Seeing that Obito didn't have a suitable candidate, Yahiko suggested gloomily. No matter when, his voice always gave a very gloomy and heavy feeling. The him in his mouth was naturally the masked man Dustless. We can only ask him. Obito nodded silently, and just as he was about to activate his ki and leave, Dustless, who rarely shows up, suddenly appeared like a ghost. Unexpectedly, there was a young man with delicate features following behind him. "Long time no see, Nagato." The masked man stared at Yahiko with a black iron rod, and his face was filled with a pleasant smile. His tone was the same as the first time they met a few years ago. Nagato, who was controlling Yahiko, was slightly stunned and immediately nodded. "Who is that?" Looking at the hazy figure hidden in the darkness, Obito frowned and then looked at the masked man with displeasure. Obviously, he was very dissatisfied with this approach. He suddenly brought an inexplicable person, especially when he didn't know whether this person was an enemy or a friend. He is the one who is about to replace Orochimaru, the new member of the Akatsuki, Uchiha Dustless. At this moment, the masked man was Uchiha Kagami. He and Dustless were quite similar in stature, and the tone of voice and the use of jutsu were exactly the same. He was also wearing a mask, so he didn't arouse Obito and Pain's suspicion. "Yo!" A young man walked out of the darkness with a smile on his face. His appearance was similar to Itachi's. He looked very young, in his 20s. He smiled at Obito and Yahiko, giving off a very gentle feeling. How could it be him? Then who is this masked man? After being stunned for a while, Obito roared in his heart and looked at Dustless's smiling face with uncertainty. A long time ago, Obito suspected that the masked man was Uchiha Dustless. Especially when he destroyed Konoha, his strength made him suspect Dustless, but the scene in front of him completely subverted his inference. Sure enough, Obito already guessed that it was me, but it's still too early for you to fight with me. Seeing the look of disbelief in Obito's eyes, Dustless laughed in his heart. He can be sure that this kid's heart is in a mess right now. I'm afraid that he's trying to figure out who this masked man is. Dustless, who has both the Tensigen and the Rinnegan, has a far better control of the Yin-Yang release than others. The masked Uchiha Kagami in front of him was like a normal human, breathing and heartbeat. The only difference is that his consciousness was controlled by Dustless. "I didn't expect you to still be alive." Yahiko looked at Dustless with indifference. After a few years, he still couldn't forget Dustless. It was Dustless who defeated him, Yahiko, and Konan. Fortunately, Uchiha Madara saved him in order to prevent the plan from failing, otherwise he would have died a long time ago. From now on, he will replace Orochimaru and form a team with Sasori of the Red Sand. Uchiha Kagami's voice was indifferent. He was too lazy to explain more to Dustless, just like Dustless's usual style. "There is no problem with this." Obito and Yahiko looked at each other and couldn't help but nod. Dustless's strength was beyond doubt, especially Yahiko, who knew Dustless's strength better. Many years ago, he could easily crush the three of them. His strength was even better than his own Rinnegan. Obito nodded and didn't choose to ask more. Now, he was just thinking about who the masked man in front of him was. After all, Dustless, who he suspected to be the masked man, has come out, so the masked man in front of him was obviously someone else. As for the problem of Uchiha Wuchin, it's just a trivial matter. Yahiko welcomed Dustless to join the Akatsuki. This way, not only can they solve the population problem, but they can also get a free, super strong fighting force, killing two birds with one stone. A month later, in the gloomy cave, there was no light all year round. The coldness and darkness were the most realistic portrayals of this place. In the depths of the cave, one could see a blurry, tall shadow. It was about 10 meters tall, and its entire body was covered in uneven protrusions. It was especially terrifying. There were 10 cylindrical protrusions on its back, and its wounds were as smooth as if they had been cut off. It made one's imagination run wild, especially when one looked up and saw that the giant had 9 huge eyes. It invisibly added a lot of fear. It was the Gedomazo. A few years ago, Dustless gave the Gedomazo to Uzumaki Nagato. Anyway, he didn't need it for the time being, so he gave it to the embryonic form of the Akatsuki. Of course, the Gedomazo also sealed the Kyuubi's In attribute chakra. Looking around, the Gedomazo opened its hands, and 9 figures stood on its 10 huge fingers. All of them were wearing black trench coats embroidered with strange and dazzling red clouds. This time, it wasn't like the usual, where all the members of the Akatsuki showed up in their original form, including Uchiha Itachi, Pain, and Konan. All the members of the Akatsuki showed up to greet the new members. Among them, the most unhappy were the zombie duo Kakuzu and Haiden. Chapter 177. The reason why Fei Duan and Kakuzu were the most upset was because the two of them had accepted a mission from the black market to earn extra money. Just as they were about to completely kill each other, they were forcibly recalled back because of Pain's order. Then, Fei Duan and Kakuzu were quite dissatisfied, especially Kakuzu, who loved money like his life. How could he not be angry when the cooked duck flew away? That newcomer's face is really big. He actually made us all wait for him. Hayden's voice sounded. Obviously, he was quite dissatisfied with this so-called newcomer. Although he was not as obsessed with money as Hayden, he enjoyed the process of fighting very much. Now that he was forcibly summoned by Pain, he was also holding back the anger in his heart. It seems that our S-class rebellious ninjas are becoming more and more worthless. Any random person who comes here needs us to greet him. Kakuzu complained, but when he could make a lot of money, it was interrupted by this newcomer. So naturally, he didn't show the slightest mercy to this so-called newcomer. Although the other members of Akatsuki didn't speak, their faces were faintly showing some dissatisfaction. It would be ridiculous to say that one person made all of them come here once. Oh, I'm sorry to make you wait for me. Shizuku's laughter had a bit of banter, especially the frivolous and indifferent tone, which made Kakuzu's face collapse. His oily green eyes flashed with ominous light, and his whole body was filled with cold, killing intent. With a murderous gaze, he looked at the place where the voice came from under the dark rock. After a few breaths of time, a handsome young man in his 20s came into view. His appearance was similar to Uchiha Itachi's, and he had a bright smile on his face. He didn't seem to fit in with the Akatsuki, an organization composed entirely of rebellious ninjas. Uchiha Dustless, it's you? The first one to speak was not Kisame, who had seen Dustless before and fought with him, but rather Konan, who had never spoken and was also the only female member of Akatsuki, who had an indifferent face like an angel. It's really him. It's impossible. He's already dead. Kisame looked at Dustless, who was in his 20s, and his face was gloomy. Although the last time he saw Dustless was a few years ago, he could never forget the appearance of Dustless in his life. Even if he grew up now, he could still recognize him at a glance. However, it was said that Uchiha Dustless was dead, and he suddenly came back to life. Even with his beast-like ability to accept and adapt, he couldn't accept such a reality. He stopped thinking and looked at Dustless with a smile on his face, especially when the person in front of him was about to become his companion. The one with the most complicated thoughts was undoubtedly Uchiha Itachi. His 3 Tomo Sharingan was like stagnant water. He was sure that the person in front of him, who he had never met before, was his big brother. The feeling of blood connection in his bones wouldn't lie. The Sand Village was defeated by him. Sasori also looked over and muttered to himself in surprise. Looking at Dustless, who was in his 20s, his pupils flashed with a strange color. He was a ninja who betrayed the Sand Village, so naturally, he was curious about Dustless who defeated the Sand Village. Everyone's heart was active, thinking about Dustless's past. Even the slightest details were not missed. Well, it's just another vase who knows how to play Jinjutsu. A disdainful sneer resounded. The owner of the voice was none other than Hayden, who looked at Dustless contemptuously with a proud and arrogant smile on his face. Obviously, he still held a grudge against Uchiha for being controlled by Uchiha Sharingan last time. Especially with the 3-section scythe on his shoulder, there was no doubt that he was looking for trouble. Reckless thing. Kisame's disdainful gaze swept past Hayden, cursing in his heart that they deserved to be called the zombie duo. Their brains are full of paste, Uchiha Dustless, and he are not in the same dimension at all. However, Kisame was too lazy to meddle in other people's business. After all, a character like Hayden can't be persuaded easily, and he and Haydn are quite disagreeable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to laugh at Haydn and see the strength of Uchiha Dustless. How can he easily let it go? I've heard that Haydn's brain is lacking a string, sure enough. Looking at Haydn and Kakuzu behind him without fear, Dustless was speechless. He just joined the Akatsuki, and someone came out to slap his face. It's really bad luck. Let me see if you're just a vase who knows how to use Sharingan. Haydn sneered at Dustless, the 3-section scythe in his hand, and at the same time, he turned his head and looked at the silent Uchiha Itachi. It was self-evident who he was talking about. Bring on. Smiling casually, Dustless looked at Haydn without fear, and his thumb pointed at Haydn and Kaku, indicating the zombie duo to bring it on. A straight light flashed from his palm and quickly materialized, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely sharp Kusanagi sword. Courting death. The murderous light in Kakuzu's eyes suddenly shot out, and the murderous aura of his body swarmed out like a tide. He originally thought that Dustless was going to fight with Haydn, but he didn't expect that he would also fight with Haydn 1 against 2. It's simply outrageous. It's a slap in their faces. Since you two don't want to come, then I will. With a chuckle, Dustless's body lost its texture and flashed with a dazzling light, which was very conspicuous in the dark cave. The light body turned into a straight golden light and went straight out, disappearing in an instant. So fast. The members of the Akatsuki were stunned, and even the calm Uchiha Itachi's face changed slightly, and he frowned. His big brother was indeed a bit evil. Only Pain, Konan, and Kisame could keep their faces unchanged, and only Pain, who fought with Dustless in the past. Chapter 178. Seeing Dustless suddenly and strangely disappear, Fei Duan and Jiao were both stunned. Immediately, in the dark space, a cold light suddenly streaked across the air. Fei Duan almost instinctively picked up the red 3-section scythe in his hand to block. Clang! The buzzing sound of the collision of steel resounded, and the sparks were particularly dazzling. Through the faint light that disappeared in a flash, they could clearly see Dustless with a smile on his face. It seemed that he was surprised that Haydn could resist his attack, and there were faint ripples in his pupils. This guy, what a powerful force! Feeling the tremendous power imparted by the Scarlet Scythe, Fei Duan's expression changed drastically. He sucked in a breath of cold air and revealed a look of astonishment and shock. In that instant of confrontation, his arm was shaken to the point of numbness. Because he couldn't withstand the impact of the tremendous power, his body was forced back several steps before he could barely withstand the slash. "Do you even put me in your eyes?" A cold and hoarse voice sounded, and then there was a shrill sound. Looking up, they saw a flash of lightning appearing in the palm of Kakuzu. They could clearly see the silver lightning dagger. Whoosh! The sound of a whistling sound sounded, and then they saw the silver dagger whistling through the air. The crackling sound of thunder obviously showed that this ninjutsu was not simple, and it wanted to penetrate Dustless's chest. Insignificant skill. Wu Chen's tranquil eyes stared at the approaching blade light. He didn't move from the beginning to the end, quietly and calmly waiting for the arrival of the butcher's knife. His deep and bright eyes were calm and composed. His whole body was suffused with a golden luster, as gentle as the sun, giving people a warm and serene feeling. Pretentious brat. Her nose wrinkled slightly, and there were some faint ripples in Conan's beautiful pupils. She immediately whispered in dissatisfaction. Even if Dustless was now an adult, perhaps her impression of him was still the brat from the beginning. Although Conan's voice was as soft as a mosquito, someone still heard it. Pain turned his head and looked at Conan in surprise. He immediately bowed his head and pondered. There was a faint light in the depths of his eyes, and then he recovered his calmness. The sharp silver light was about to penetrate Dustless. Looking at it, the sharp blade condensed by lightning went straight through Dustless's body. The thunder-long blade was like a stone in the sea. Dustless's body was covered with golden waves, and he immediately shuttled through it. On the other side, Haydn was bloody unlucky. Pucci, a piercing pain spread throughout his body, and scarlet blood splashed out. Fate Duan subconsciously touched his chest and reached out to touch it. Then he raised his hand and stared blankly at the crimson blood in his hand. The corner of his mouth twitched violently, and a shrill scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered resounded throughout the cave, echoing for a long time. Kakuzu, you old bastard, did you do it on purpose? Fei Duan was so angry that he was trembling. His face kept twitching as he looked at Kakuzu. His gloomy eyes were clearly saying, even if I'm immortal, you can't test my body so casually. You'll be ruined. This is an accidental injury. I didn't expect him to have such a strange ability. Kakuzu's face was gloomy, and he argued with a red face. It's okay to be despised by others, but if he was looked at by Haydn's gloomy eyes, Kakuzu would feel uncomfortable all over, even if it was his fault. Haydn looked at Kakuzu gloomily when he heard this. If it weren't for his immortal body, he would have already died. Now is not the time for you two to exchange feelings. The scarlet Sharingan appeared, and the deep blood-red tomo was like rolling condensed blood, full of ominous. The blood-red light flashing in the darkness was particularly gloomy, and the powerful eye power made people palpitate. Gulp! What a terrifying eye! Haydn's soul was throbbing under the gaze of the scarlet tomo, and his throat twitched up and down. Suddenly, he remembered Itachi's method of controlling him last time, and subconsciously closed his eyes. However, it was too late. Boom! The powerful eye power directly poured into Fei Duan's mind, controlling his thoughts. His eyes became dull and lifeless, and the sharp sickle in his hand fell to the ground, splashing up a cloud of dust. He felt like a walking corpse that had been stripped of his inner soul. Why does the three-tomo Sharingan have such great eye power? Itachi frowned slightly as he glanced at Wuchen from the corner of his eyes. Obviously, the Sharingan has three-tomo Sharingan, but it gives people the feeling of a Mangekyo. Yo! But Dustless apparently noticed Itachi's gaze, and he also looked at Itachi on the finger of the Geto Mazo, showing a gentle smile, giving people a warm feeling. Seeing this, Itachi was slightly stunned, and then he nodded, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. He felt that Dustless's motives were not pure, and he began to be secretly vigilant. Even if this person was his brother, he couldn't let it go. Hypocritical man. Conan naturally saw Dustless's expression, and she, who didn't like Dustless, naturally snorted, especially that ordinary smile made her particularly uncomfortable. Seeing that Haydn was instantly KO'd, Kakuzu's mouth twitched fiercely, and when he was about to sneak attack Dustless, Pain, who was usually silent, suddenly stopped this boring duel. It's over, Kakuzu. Looking at the murderous Kakuzu, Pain then looked at the unconscious Haydn with pity and shook his head slightly. Maybe the Sharingan is this kid's nemesis, and he lost twice under the Sharingan. Break his Genjutsu. Glancing at Dustless casually, Pain's tone was indifferent, and there was a faint will that could not be violated. Maybe after all these years, he has really regarded himself as a special godlike existence. I'll let you be cocky for a while. Dustless couldn't help muttering in his heart, and at the same time, looking at the half-dead Haydn, he put away the scarlet-red tomo and broke Haydn's jaw. Chapter 179. Opening his eyes in a trance, Haydn looked at the world in front of him like a child who had just woken up, and what he saw was the old face of Kakuzu. Stand up quickly after making a fool of yourself. Don't make me lose face with you. Kakuzu scolded Haydn with a gloomy expression. He was the most senior member of the Akatsuki, after all. He was an old antique who was almost 100 years old, and was a contemporary of the first Hokage Senju Hashirama. Where did that kid go? Look at me, Uncle Haydn. Shut up. Kakuzu glared fiercely at Fei Dan, then looked away and silently returned to his original position on the ghetto statue's finger. Fei-Dan tactfully followed Kakuza back. Uchiha dustless. Looking at Dustless expressionlessly, Pain's calm eyes flickered with faint ripples. After a moment of silence, he finally made a shocking decision. From today on, you are one of the members of the Akatsuki organization. Throwing the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds to Dustless, Pain stopped, but he didn't intend to give the blue ring to Dustless. Serves you right, kid. Seeing this scene, Haydn laughed secretly. I'm afraid that Dustless is the most miserable one in the history of the Akatsuki. He doesn't have a ring that represents his status as a member of the Akatsuki organization. But soon, Haydn's eyes widened as he looked at Pain's action in disbelief, and his breathing stopped. Looking thoughtfully at the silent Sasori, Pain withdrew his gaze and immediately looked at Xiao Nan, who was as cold as an iceberg. Xiao Nan's pretty face had an unapproachable expression. His eyes flashed with a touch of decisiveness. He took off the ring with the word 0 on his finger and handed it to Wu Chun. Everyone was stunned. From now on, your code name is 0, and this is the ring that represents your identity. Under the astonished gaze of everyone, Pain threw the ring in his hand to Dustless without hesitation and looked at Dustless very seriously and indifferently said, "From now on, you and Conan are a team." Wu Chun frowned when he heard the words. His deep black pupils stared at Pain's stagnant eyes, and then a hint of understanding flashed in his eyes. He is going to let Conan monitor me. Thinking quickly, Dustless quickly saw through Pain's plan. No one in the Akatsuki could be trusted, but only Conan was trustworthy, and it was not difficult to see that Pain didn't trust Dustless that much. Even if he was sent by the masked man, he sent Conan to monitor Dustless. Although 0, this ring represented the leader in a certain sense, but the members of Akatsuki organization couldn't possibly recognize Dustless as their boss just because this ring was given to Dustless. Conan was unusually calm, and her performance was very calm. Without a doubt, she also saw through Pain's intention and knew his motive for arranging her to secretly monitor Dustless. Although she hated Dustless, but regarding Pain's command, Conan still chose to obey without hesitation. Scorpio, on the other hand, was quite calm. For him, it didn't matter if he had teammates or not. If he didn't like them, he would kill them all the same. Out of sight, out of mind. In short, Akatsuki organization gathered all kinds of freaks, whether it was their strength or their character, they were all like this. As for Sasori's teammate, I have already found a candidate. Looking at Sasori, Pain continued to say, Deidara of the Rock Village is a good candidate, but that kid's character seems to be a bit hard. This time, Itachi, Kisame, Sasori, Conan, and Dustless, you 5 will tame him. Deidara was now young, but his reputation was already known. When he was 9 years old, he was forced to leave the village because he often caused terrorist incidents. He was the disciple of the 3rd-generation Tsuchikage, Inoki. Now, he was 12 years old, and his strength was far stronger than 3 years ago. It seems that there is a difficult task for him to join for the first time. That explosive claim maniac is very difficult to deal with. I heard that because he is too dangerous, Inoki sent him to a place where there are few people. The one who spoke was naturally Dustless. He smiled and explained to the members of the Akatsuki. The only thing that made people frown was that his smile was like a cunning fox. Indeed, Pain nodded. He seemed surprised that Dustless knew about Deidara. Even if Deidara was now famous, he was still not worth mentioning to Dustless. Can he really be trusted? Sasori said with some doubts. It was really difficult for him to team up with a kid who was nearly 12 years old. Even if Itachi was only 13.5 years old, he couldn't eliminate the doubts in his heart. Perhaps Kisame also had doubts about this before he saw Uchiha Itachi. This, Pain's eyes flashed with hesitation. Deidara's strength was acceptable, but it didn't mean that other aspects were acceptable. For example, personality, to some extent, was the opposite of Deidara. Deidale and Sasori of the Red Sand both pursue the so-called art. They are the same people, but the difference is also the difference between heaven and earth. Deidale pursues the art of the moment, while Sasori of the red sand pursues the art of eternity. This was the biggest difference between heaven and earth. It was inevitable that there would be quarrels. With Sasori's temperament, he might really make Deidara a puppet. Let's go to the rock village first. Seeing that Pain was hesitant, Dustless suggested tentatively. Deadale was still very compatible with Scorpio of the red sand. Even if there was a quarrel, Scorpio of the red sand may not be able to kill Deadale. Pain nodded when he heard this. It can only be like this, whether it was suitable or not. Only by meeting them will they know. Chapter 180. On the path in the dense forest, two isolated figures were slowly moving forward. Their black trench coats were embroidered with red clouds. One of them was obviously a woman, with dark blue hair and a lavender paper flower on the right side of her head. Her delicate and dignified appearance was filled with endless indifference. It was Conan. The tall young man beside her was a head taller than Conan. His slightly messy but neat hair fluttered in the wind from time to time, adding a little wild and unruly feeling. Who else could it be but Dustless? Dustless was particularly conspicuous in his black trench coat. The front of his fingers was painted black and purple, and he wore a wooden hat with some bells. As the breeze blew, the white ribbon tied to the bamboo hat would dance in the wind, and the bell on it would also let out a crisp silver bell sound. Time flew by. 3 days had already passed since the last shore gathering. During this period of time, Dustless and Conan had also formed a brand new combination of God's messenger. There is no need to doubt that they were absolutely the most powerful combination in the Akatsuki organization. Although Conan didn't like Dustless, she put down the grudge in her heart and chose to obey Uzumaki Nagato's arrangement. She formed a team with Dustless to monitor Dustless, and also to borrow his strength to help the Akatsuki organization collect several tailed beasts as soon as possible. As if thinking of something, Conan's footsteps suddenly stopped. Looking at Dustless's back, she was puzzled. What's wrong? Noticing that Xiaonan had stopped her footsteps, Wu Chun, who had turned his head, slightly wrinkled his brows and puzzledly looked at Xiaonan. He always felt that this woman was weird. If it wasn't for entering Akatsuki to do as the Romans do, he really didn't want to team up with this woman to do mission. Conan's eyes stared at Dustless and suddenly asked, "Who was the mysterious person who stopped you?" Dustless's strength was obvious to all. Even Uzumaki Nagato, who had Rinnegan, was no match for him. Who would stop Dustless? Conan was naturally very curious. However, she was doomed to be disappointed. This has nothing to do with you. After entering Akatsuki, there's no rule that says you have to report your private matters. Dustless glanced at the confused Xiao Nan and withdrew his gaze. He turned around and walked away, leaving Xiao Nan alone. The mysterious person that Conan was talking about was naturally Uchiha Madara. Perhaps it wasn't him who organized Dustless. Maybe Conan, Uzumaki Nagato, and Yahiko were mercilessly killed many years ago. You're so strong, but so petty. Xiaonan looked at Dustless, who was leaving, and rolled her eyes. She immediately followed Dustless. She and Dustless were now in the Oracle team, so they naturally had to carry out the mission together. On the peak of the mountain, 3 indistinct figures flickered in and out of existence as they stared at the huge village in front of them. Behind them, a strong cold wind whistled past, accompanied by endless sand and dust. It was like a sandstorm blowing up their robes. Too slow, Dustless. Sasori of the red sand turned his head and looked discontentedly at Dustless, who had just arrived. His voice was full of displeasure. He was most annoyed with the kind of person who made him waste time. Sorry. Shrugging his shoulders, Wu Chan said to Sasori, Kisame, and Uchiha Itachi apologetically. I'm sorry. He and Conan belonged to the last group to set off. Originally, he wanted to take Conan to go faster, but she firmly disagreed. Dustless also rushed with her, which delayed them for a few hours. It's really a bad place with bad weather. Kisame looked around and frowned slightly after seeing the endless sandstorm. Perhaps he was born as a shark, so he preferred water. It was particularly unsuitable for the dry environment of the rock village. Yes, Itachi nodded. The climate of the rock village was really bad. He immediately looked at Dustless secretly, and a faint ripple appeared in his pupils. He closed his eyes again and began to think. The feeling that Wu-chan gave him was not that kind of simple danger. It was like a giant beast hiding in the deep sea. Although it seemed that if you did not provoke it, it would not take the initiative to attack you. It was very gentle. However, no one knew when this giant beast with a bloody mouth would secretly attack you. When the sawtooth opened, it might be the time of life and death. This kind of person was often the most dangerous. It was fine if he didn't take action, but if he did, he would have a 90% chance of succeeding. In other words, Wu-chan was the kind of person who was careful and wouldn't take any risks casually. While the few of them were deep in thought, Xiaonan finally arrived. While the so-called Oracle team is just SOSO. Seeing Xiaonan come, Sasori of the Red Sand immediately ridiculed her. Because of Xiaonan and Wu-chan, the three of them were attacked by the sandstorm for a few hours. Well, let's go find that kid. Wu-chan chuckled. Although he didn't care about this so-called Oracle combination, Xiaonan, who was beside him with a pale face, didn't think so. Perhaps in Conan's view, this was Sasori challenging the authority of the former pain. Let's go find Deidara first. As for other insignificant things, let's talk about it later. Seeing that Xiaonan and Sasori of the Red Sand had signs of a fight, Wu-chan spoke to stop them. At the same time, his whole body was covered with a golden luster. Like a divine rainbow cutting through the void, he went straight toward the giant village in front of him and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It's still the same terrifying speed. It hasn't changed at all. Looking at the golden rainbow that cut the sky, Hoshigaki Kisame laughed bitterly at himself and suddenly remembered that Dustless defeated him and Terumi Mei with overwhelming power, and his shark face was particularly complicated. Have you ever fought with him, Kisame? Uchiha Itachi asked curiously, and, at the same time, it attracted the attention of Sasori and Conan, because Kisame's strength was obvious to all, and he was known as a humanoid-tailed beast. Hearing this, the bitterness on Kisame's face became more obvious, and he spread his hands, and his face was full of entanglement and helplessness. More than just fighting, if he didn't deliberately let me win, I would have died many years ago. Chapter 181. Kisame's face was full of emotion. If it weren't for Dustless holding back, he would have already died, let alone joining the Akatsuki. He clenched his huge fist tightly, but in the end, he couldn't help but let it go. The self-deprecation on his thick face became clearer, and he subconsciously touched the scar on his face. Although it had completely disappeared after many years, there were still some traces left. It was also because of this reason that Kismet Ghost Shark trained himself even more crazily. He dreamed that one day, even if he couldn't surpass Wu-chan, he would at least have the power to fight with him. Now, it seemed that the gap between them hadn't narrowed at all. Instead, it had widened a lot. Sure enough, that man is as dangerous and mysterious as the masked man. Hearing this, Itachi's eyes were full of stormy waves, and his face was unnatural. He naturally knew the strength of Kisame, and Dustless's strength was self-evident. Even if he fought against Dustless, he was afraid that it would be like a stone thrown into the sea, and he wouldn't be able to make much of a ripple. What did that guy do in the years after his death? Looking up slightly, looking at the straight beam of light that hadn't dissipated in the sky, Itachi bowed his head in thought. He really couldn't figure out what Dustless was planning in the past few years. However, there was one thing that was certain. During those few years when Dustless's secret disappeared, he was definitely doing secret things that no one knew about. My so-called big brother, what are you doing and what is your plan? Putting down his uneasy heart, Itachi's obsession with Dustless was even stronger than before. His eyes looked indifferently at the void in front of him, and then he disappeared in the direction where Dustless had disappeared. If I can turn those two brothers into my eternal works of art. Seeing that Dustless and Itachi had disappeared, Conan and Kisame also disappeared. Only Sasori, whose eyes were shining, was waiting quietly. He had seen the strength of Dustless and Itachi with his own eyes. If he could make them into puppets, their combat power would definitely double. While his heart was burning, Sasori's blazing expression suddenly froze, and his heart became cold. Uchiha Itachi was already a very difficult and powerful opponent. If Wuchen was added into the mix for some reason, Sasori suddenly felt that if the two brothers were willing to cooperate with each other, the whole world would be theirs. In the empty lobby, countless iron giants with ghost eyes and fangs could be clearly seen. Their faces were terrible as ghosts, giving the feeling that they were demons from hell. 5 figures stood side by side, and Dustless, who came early, stood in the middle, seemed to be quietly waiting for someone to come. They began to close their eyes. Coming. Along with the voice of Wu Chun, the members of Akatsuki organization opened their eyes one after another and rather expectantly looked at the distant immature figure. Especially Sasori of Akatsuki, but seeing that toddler shadow, his old face immediately collapsed. Are you kidding me? You want that kid to team up with me? Red Sand Scorpion's eyes immediately darkened. Everyone, including Dustless and Xiao Nan, furrowed their brows without a trace. Although Itachi was only 13.5 years old, at least he seemed to have thoroughly matured, and his childishness had faded, but the kid coming toward him was obviously jumping, giving the feeling that he had not grown up. Don't be impatient. You can't judge a book by its cover. Let's wait and see. Glancing faintly at Sasori beside him, Wu Chan calmly opened his mouth. Especially his eagle-like eyes emitted a cold light, which immediately made Sasori swallow back the words he was about to say. This guy gives people a terrible feeling. The corner of his eyes vaguely looked at Dustless, and Sasori said solemnly in his heart, even if some people are strong, there will be a fixed boundary, and Dustless gave him a feeling like a person without any constraints, without any so-called boundary. I would like to see what's so different about him. Raising his cold eyes, Scorpio gloomily looked at the bouncing golden-haired brat in front of him. This brat's appearance coincided with the information. Obviously, he was the so-called Deidara. Soon, the short and tender body stepped into the main hall. Who are you people? Without my permission, who let you set foot here? Deidara looked at the unknown strangers in front of him, frowned slightly, and immediately said viciously, "These people wore the same clothes, and they obviously belonged to the same force." Thinking of what he had done in the past few years, Deidara's eyes were even more murderous. Because he accepted a lot of terrorist attacks, he offended a lot of people. These people in front of him may be hired killers. Who sent you here? Tell me, or don't even think about leaving this place alive. Looking at Dustless and the other 4 with hostility, Deidara's pupils were emitting a cold light. At the same time, some white animals could be seen in his hand. They were strange creatures similar to spiders with many long legs. However, Dustless and the other 4 looked at this kid with a smile. This kid doesn't seem to understand the situation. Kisame stared at Deidara, who was full of murderous intent, and said very jokingly. Immediately, he looked at the explosive clay in Deidara's hand and couldn't help but frown. This kid looks like he will die early. I really don't know what the leader sees in him. Sasori looked at Deidara disdainfully with a sneer on his face. He only thought that this kid came out to be funny, and there was nothing special about him. Especially the white spiders made of explosive clay in Deidara's hand. Those ridiculous things like toys made Sasori snort. In his heart, he had already classified Deidara as a child who had not grown up. Only ordinary children would make this kind of toy. Chapter 182. Deidara looked at Dustless and the other 4 with murderous intent. The murderous intent that broke out of his body filled the empty hall. The cold mist lingered in the air, flashing and appearing, as if thousands of ghosts were screaming. Especially the air that was inhaled into the lungs had a lot of bloody smell. The environment in front of him suddenly turned into the gloomy 18th layer of hell. This kid's murderous intent is quite huge. He has killed so many people at such a young age. I have underestimated him. He withdrew his teasing gaze. Feeling the terrifying murderous intent, Kisame was a little more cautious. It seemed that this kid's young age was not bad. The number of people he had killed was not small, and judging from the scale and density of the murderous intent, many of them belonged to the masters. Take Dustless, for example. The scale and density of his murderous intent were incomparably huge. Because he had killed too many people, too many masters had died in the hands of Dustless, which created his murderous intent like a god and a demon. A kid is a kid. Look at the toy in his hand. It's obviously something that only a kid of a few years old would play with. This kid is still playing with mud at such a big age. It's ridiculous. Looking at Deidara with a sneer, Sasori did not hide the contempt in his eyes. At the same time, his heart twitched fiercely. He secretly scolded himself for being so unlucky to have such a bitter and brainless teammate. Sasori's sarcasm was fatal to Deidara. He immediately scurried up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He glared at Sasori with anger in his eyes. This is great art. You 5 idiots. Ordinary people like you can't understand the true meaning of art. You are all laughable and stupid secular people. When he mentioned the art, Deidara began to smile with an unprecedented excitement between his eyebrows. Then he looked at Dustless and the other 4 with disdain. His face was full of contempt, as if he was looking at country bumpkins. He could not arouse the slightest interest. Why do I feel that this kid is so annoying? The corners of Kisame's mouth twitched fiercely. He was speechless. It's a conflict between Sasori of the Red Sand and this little kid, but the 4 of us are involved as well. Ridiculous. Not to mention Sasori, who is already unhappy, Dustless, Conan, Uchiha Itachi, and the others nodded. This boy seems to think too highly of himself. They must let him know how much weight he has. This is a good opportunity. Deidara smiled cruelly, as if he had already seen the miserable scene of the 5 people being blown up into pieces. His eyes flashed with a cold light, as if he had already seen the miserable scene of the 5 people being blown up into pieces. This kid is quite capable. Dustless cast an appreciative look at Deidara when he noticed that his body was suddenly surrounded by the clay centipedes that came out of the ground. Although he had already discovered it, it was undeniable that Deidara's means were quite brilliant. Not only Dustless, but Conan, Itachi, Kisame, and Sasori also had centipedes made of clay wrapped around their bodies. Say who sent you, and I can reluctantly leave you with an intact corpse. Deidara looked coldly at Dustless and the other 3 who were bound, and, at the same time, he had already printed with one hand. The killing intent all over his body rose to the limit, and he was about to cause the clay centipedes to explode. I'm really sorry. Dustless looked at Deidara with a smile, deliberately dragging his tone for Deidara to hear, and said softly, "Bombs are very dangerous. I'm not sure if your artistic attainments can easily control the range of the bomb and leave us with an intact corpse." So, his pitch-black eyes narrowed, and the demonic blood-red 3-tomo jade immediately appeared. "For our safety, you'd better be obedient and let us capture you." As Dustless's voice fell, Deidara's world suddenly changed, and he was stunned to find that his body was full of spiders made of explosive clay. Deidara stared blankly at the explosive spiders all over his body. The cold sweat on both sides of his forehead uncontrollably dripped down, and his body shivered uncontrollably. Perhaps when he gave the order to detonate just now, he would have been blown up into nothingness by the clay spiders all over his body. When did this happen? Looking at Dustless and the other 4, Deidara's heart fell to the bottom with despair. "It turns out that your art can't resist my genjutsu. It seems that you should join the Akatsuki, which is our organization." Deidara must join the Akatsuki. Faced with such a dilemma, he had no choice but to join. Anyway, this guy was the kind of person who wasn't welcomed in the rock village. The villagers of the rock village also avoided this crazy bomber. Therefore, the third Suchikage Anoki isolated this kid. What if I say I'm not interested? Looking gloomily at Dustless, who was standing indifferently, as if everything was under his control, Dedale coldly asked. The corner of his eyes glanced at the clay spiders all over his body, and his expression became colder, and his unwavering tone faintly revealed the taste of death. This is very simple, as long as I take the opportunity to get rid of you before I leave. Kisame took a few steps forward, and the bandage on his back was released, revealing the dense barbs, which were extraordinarily sharp, and it seemed that they could easily pierce steel. It was obvious what kind of miserable end would happen to people who were injured. Kisame's face was full of killing intent, and his murderous intent was more terrifying than the previous Dedale. The murderous intent in his body continued to overflow, and the size of the muscles on his hands also increased, and he stretched out his disgusting big tongue, as if he couldn't wait to devour Dedale. This old man's disciple is not someone you can touch. Damn Akatsuki. Under the unprecedented pressure of death, Daidara's will was inevitably shaken. Just when he was about to consider whether to accept the condition of Akatsuki or not, an aged but full of energy roar exploded in the sky, and soon boundless chakra descended. In the lobby where Dustless and the others were, they were immediately surrounded by a white enchantment, isolating the outside matter, and there was a circular light inside the enchantment. Dust release, primordial world stripping technique. Chapter 183. A white brilliance appeared in front of Wuchen and the others. Itachi and Conan, who was beside Wuchen, dodged the terrible halo one after another. Within the area covered by the white light, everything showed signs of decay, and there were faint signs of collapse. One could feel the power that made one's heart palpitate. The purest form of destruction gave one the feeling that the world had come to an end. Get out of range of that jutsu. Seeing that Wu Chun was motionless like a sculpture, Xiaonan immediately shouted at him. Although she didn't like him very much, they were now teammates in the same trench. All the grievances and entanglements in the past had disappeared along with it. Don't worry, he can't hurt me. Looking at Conan with a comforting smile, Dustless closed his eyes, and the light around his body became more intense, like a small sun. It was impossible to open one's eyes. Boom! 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 Everything in the white enchantment was erased, and the empty hall instantly collapsed and tilted, turning into ruins. The ground was destroyed by the destructive force, and a huge, deep pit was formed. The soil in the depths of the ground that had not seen the light of day for many years was refurbished, exposing it to the sunlight. What a terrible jutsu! Kisame and Itachi looked at each other, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes, and they were surprised to see a short old man floating in the sky. It seems that one of them was killed. The short old man who could use dust release undoubtedly showed his identity. He was Inoki, the third Hokage of the Rock Village. Although it's a pity that I didn't kill you all at once, it's not difficult to deal with you slowly. Inoki stared at Uchiha Itachi and the others calmly. As for Wu Chun, he had ignored him. No one has ever been hit by dust release and not died. Damn Akatsuki, unknowingly, they gathered so many powerful ninjas. It seems that they're all S-class ninjas of various countries. His face suddenly became gloomy. Inoki's expression was no longer as relaxed as before, and instead, it was full of caution. These people weren't simple. Aside from the Akatsuki that was killed before, Inoki was very familiar with the identity and origin of the remaining two. Kirigakure's S-class ninjas Kisame and the young man with 3 Tomo Sharingan. Inoki's muddy old eyes fell on Uchiha Itachi, and his eyes flashed with confusion. He seemed to have seen this face sometime in the past. It turned out to be the culprit who destroyed the Uchiha family, Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Dustless's younger brother, No wonder this old man has a feeling of déjà vu. After staring at Itachi for half a year, Inoki's mind returned, and he remembered the most annoying smile in his life. Except for Uchiha Madara, and his old face suddenly collapsed. Especially when Inoki was sleeping and dreaming, he would often dream of that face that he couldn't wait to tear apart. Fortunately, this old man brought the two of them here. This time, I can eradicate you. Inoki's eyes were cold, and his dry, cracked mouth had a smug sneer. Soon, many ninjas of the rock village appeared. The Yanbi Jinchuriki and the Gobi Jinchuriki were among them. It seemed to be tricky. The Scarlet Tomo fell on the two Jinchuriki, and Itachi muttered to himself, but his tone didn't seem to care much, and he didn't even put the so-called Jinchuriki in his eyes. Even without Dustless, Itachi, Kisame, Konan, and Sasori could easily defeat the rock village. What's more, Dustless is not dead yet. Old man, I didn't expect you to take the initiative to send the Yanbi and the Gobi to me. This saves a lot of trouble. Boom, boom, boom. An ear-piercing roar resounded, and a destructive air wave immediately spread out like a tide. Under the ruins, a straight golden light soared into the sky. His thin body stood in the void, and the blue sky behind him set off Wuchen. Qing Zhao stared at Inoki, and the faint smile at the corner of his mouth had a little bit of arrogance. I haven't seen you for many years, but you haven't changed at all, my Sandame Suchivich-sama. Looking at the familiar face, Inoki was startled. He was particularly familiar with this frivolous tone, and immediately looked at the cynical and contemptuous smile, and his proud cheeks suddenly stiffened. His old face was like being slapped several times, and his eyes were red. As if he remembered something, he stared at Konan with indignation, and the corner of his mouth was twitching. How is your Akatsuki doing business? Didn't you say that this annoying guy is dead? Bastard, you actually dare to deceive this old man. You really have guts. Inoki's expression was particularly gloomy. He would never forget that when Yahiko came to the rock village to extort hundreds of millions of silver from him, he still acted like he was losing money. What does dustless mean? It means that the Akatsuki didn't complete Inoki's task, and instead he gave away hundreds of millions of silver for nothing. This, when Yahiko was still alive, Akatsuki's financial situation was really difficult. So Yahiko had no choice but to rob the rich from the rock-hidden village to help the poor. So Yahiko had no choice but to rob the rich from the rock-hidden village to help the poor. So Yahiko changed his plan to kill Dustless from the rock-hidden village. Little old man, don't you understand? You were slaughtered like a fat sheep. Fearing that Inoki couldn't understand what he meant, Dustless deliberately dragged his voice, and at the same time secretly gave a thumbs up to the dead Yahiko. Fat sheep. Inoki's mouth twitched fiercely, and he almost vomited blood. Although the Akatsuki didn't take Dustless's head to claim the bounty, they cooperated several times, so he didn't have any doubts and gave Yahiko the task reward. Calling him a fat sheep was too flattering. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.